Hello, everybody! If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and Vince is going to remember to put his mic in front of him. Yeah, it's Warhammer. So, anyways, hey, everybody. Welcome back. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Brendan. You've been here like every week, right? Everybody remembers Brendan? You all remember.
Yeah, every week. I can't remember a week that I've missed. I just set my clock to 9 o'clock and just jump on. It's
Exactly. We're about to
part of
celebrate 10 years, Brendan. I'll tell you, it's been a great journey to have you on. I really appreciate it. It's been really nice. No, obviously Brendan's back on the show. Cubic Shenanigans podcast co-host and all around amazing player, the Lord of Death. Brendan, we're glad to have you back because this is a momentous show. We are going to talk about the AOS 4.0 rules. We're going to break into them, get into the nitty, the gritty, the tricks, the surprises, the things that are going to throw people sideways. We're going to cover it all, baby. We're going to get into it. There you go. Are you excited?
Yeah, it's I've made no secrets on the show that I had not enjoyed third edition really from the outset.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously with an edition change, there's a chance at refreshing it for me. And certainly as we talk about it a little bit more, I think there's some really good and interesting things that make the game experience better for most players.
Yeah. Will it make you feel better, Brandon, if I say, hello, everybody? If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and that must mean it's time for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. There you go, Brendan. Just for you. You can cut that out and put it back at the beginning. Brandon, sorry. At any rate, we're going to talk about all these rules. But you know what? We've got some news first. It's not just getting straight into the rules. I am very excited about 4.0. I want to get to this quickly. I really do. Like, I am jazzed, and I got a lot of things to say. Boy, have we got some stuff to share with all of you. But of course, first, we got to talk about the news because Brendan, there's some big news this week, okay? Number 1, look at this crazy rumor engine. How could we ever figure out what it is? How could we possibly know?
We don't. It could be anything, truly.
It could be anything, or it could just be the Goblin Wolf Riders that this exact thing is already on.
Well, I counterposed. It's actually the special named hero from Old World that is a Wolf Rider.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what it is.
So I assume we have some kind of new Goblin Wolf Rider hero, potentially for Old World. Who knows? But like, it's Goblin Wolf Riders of some variety for some game. Cool.
Well, there is a named one in the Old World rules.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I love that the internet cracked this code so fast. Like, they shared this rumor
immediately.
engine. Like, 20 minutes later, I saw the tweet that was like, it's this thing. It exists on a model. I was like, okay. Cool. Well, all right.
Done.
Yeah, easy. Obviously, Skaven Tide goes on pre-order this weekend. I am surrounded by Skaven miniatures right now. I got my little Rat Ogre boys all primed up today. Very excited for this box. Obviously, it's a great day for me. I will admit, there's half of this box I have put together. I have begun painting. I am lavishly spending time on, and there is half of this box that is still on the sprue and may never be painted. Which half could it be? I don't know.
Probably the one with the Goblin Wolf Riders.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
you nailed it exactly. I need to find somebody else who doesn't like Skaven, but is very interested in these new Ruination Chamber Stormcast and is interested in a trade. That's what I'm looking for. Somebody, right? Somebody's got to love these Stormcast and be like, this is my jam. This is my absolute jelly roll jam right here. Could happen.
Yeah, I I mean, normally I'd take you up on that offer, but I have a Skaven army now, so
Yeah.
there's no sense. I acquired the models. I have to keep them as much as I hate it.
Nice. Nice. All right. So, I mean, I think everybody's excited. The price isn't too crazy. It's nice. It should be a good time. The box is certainly a good box. It's one of the best launch boxes they've ever put out, I think, in just the sum total of information. We're not going to talk about the Spearhead stuff at all tonight, but we will in a future week. We're going to deep dive Spearhead as well. And I will say, like, I love that there's just a big book and it has everything you need for Spearhead right there. Like, that's just my summary of this. It was actually one of the coolest things to find. So it's a good box.
Yeah, the fact the box comes with absolutely everything, comes with the General's Handbook, right? as well as the core rules and the spearhead and everything. Like, it finally is fulfilling the stated goal of you and a friend can get in, and you actually genuinely have everything you need to start playing actual legitimate games of Warhammer, as opposed to the like, oh, like the sides are roughly balanced and um, it's not the same. Like, no, with the spearhead component, it is supposed to be matched to one another and balanced against themselves.
Yeah, and from everything I've heard, the spearheads are pretty evenly balanced. I've gotten to play a few of them, and it's been good games. Silent Thunder, new to the channel. Why do people not like the Stormcast half? No, nothing against that. I think plenty of people like the Stormcast, and there's actually people excited for the Ruination Chamber. It's just I am beyond hype level a million for the Skaven because I've been waiting forever for them. And a lot of people are excited with me about New Skaven. That's all. It's just there's, New Skaven is New Skaven. We've been waiting many years. Josh, intermittently, not often is really the answer to that question. But yeah, watch, I guess it will sometimes happen. So that's pretty much what I can say there. I don't have a way to wait list or anything, sadly. Okay. Well, that brings us to some sad news, Brendan. We had to talk about it. It was inevitable, but this is the time. Our good friend, a hero of the community, a stalwart, a scholar amongst thieves, Tony P, has decided to step down, and as a result, and stop updating War Scroll Builder. As a result, War Scroll Builder, in the transition into 4th, will be going into retirement. This is sad news.
It's very, like, understood, right? I'm sure it was a lot of work. For those who weren't in Age of Sigmar from the beginning, War Scroll Builder was foundational and fundamental to the ability to create lists in standard formats and make it so that, when you got to the table, you and your opponents weren't reading through either Chicken Scratch or an Excel spreadsheet or, heaven forbid, Battle Scribe.
Good God.
Yeah. I mean, it was the format of choice, certainly all the way through 2nd, and a good chunk of the way through 3rd, until Games Workshop figured out how to get their app to output in a format that wasn't truly insane.
Yep.
Tough to see it go, and I don't want to say end of an era, because that's not fair, but for those folks who are newer to Age of Sigmar, I can't begin to explain to you how important that web page was.
Yep. And I'm sure a new challenger will rise up. The king is dead. Long live the king, right? Certain things in society. Nature abhors a vacuum, is what I'll say. But GW is going to try to fill that vacuum. Although how successful they'll be, well, let's just see. So, we also got information on the new app. Now, let's start with the good news. The good news is the app. It's another new app. I want to keep all the apps, Brendan. I can't wait until like 8th edition when I have 8 apps on my phone. I never deleted the old app, so I still got it like frozen in amber, to go look at the old War Scrolls and stuff.
Good. You can donate your phone to a museum.
Absolutely. I plan to never get rid of the 3rd edition one. The good news is at launch with all the indices, they will all be there. They'll all be digital. They'll probably have the FAQs and stuff all in them whenever that happens. And we'll have all the rules and everything like that, as well as all the spearhead stuff is included in there, which is good. So all that will be there from the jump, which is great. Not sure about the font size choice on them numbers in them circles. Boy, that's a choice. What is that, a size 6 font in there? You couldn't find a bigger number? Was there a UX person anywhere near this process?
Obviously not, right? No. Like, we know what the 3rd edition list output app was. Like, no. We know the answer is no.
No. Nobody with the title of UX or user experience or anything like that has ever gotten near one of these products. But in there they talked about how, well, you can use the Stormforge for free to build one list, but if you want to build more than one army, you gotta pay
whole
for it.
list.
I'm like, okay, well, I mean, I'll just delete the list and remake it like 100 times. I don't really care. I don't ever need to have more than one list at a time. Fine. But that also was unclear whether the War Scrolls will continue to be free once your book comes out. They were very clear that like the special abilities and stuff like that will get locked behind the paywall, but you'll unlock them with a code just like you did now. So that's more or less a continuation of current policy. But like, don't put the scrolls behind there. If they put the scrolls behind a paywall, behind this Warhammer Plus nonsense, that's complete insanity. Complete insanity. And yes, I'm aware of what the 40K app does and how it works. I don't care. 40K is a different game. AOS is different. It's like, it's nonsense. So there you go.
I would say brace for the worst on this one, Vince. I don't want to be, Captain Negativity, but I really think 40K has shown us the direction that this is going to go. Maybe I'll be wrong, but
we can only hope that someone there wakes up and has sense in their head and is like, wait a minute, the War Scrolls are a pretty basic thing that we should make sure people always have free access to, because it's important.
Yeah. What a concept.
Yeah.
The
basic game function.
How will you get excited about, the lists in general, getting a new army if you don't know what the army does? Let me just drop $40, $50, $60 on a book and a code, and so that way I can lock and see that, I hate the way this army plays,
right.
And
right.
Oh, no, I guess I'll just do this again, like into infinity. Why would we do that? If they're looking to drive sales on these things, this is a suggestion that my friend Nick has had and has pitched any Games Workshop person he's ever come across at any event, is give me an option in the app to just buy the list that I have put in there. Hyperlink, to the Warhammer page, add to cart, gone. Buy now.
Yeah.
That's how you make money.
Of course. Yeah. So I think it's a dumb decision if they end up locking any of that stuff behind the paywall. Like, just make it work like the current app. The current app is fine. What are you doing? And yes, as people pointed out, you can make like a bunch of lists, because in the initial launch, during the initial period, they're going to let you make as many lists as you want. And it's like, theoretically, you could just make a bunch of lists and then just have them in there as placeholders, like make one for every army, and then just edit them every time, and they'll never go, because none of the ones you have made shut off, which is funny. But like, I don't want to have to game your dumb app. Okay, just don't be stupid, GWs. Just stop it. Get help. Okay, so that's it. Like, stop. Like, whoever's doing the business case work on this, you've messed up. So there you go. I imagine if it does suck, people will just move to new recruit or whatever, stuff like that, and that's fine. Like, good, okay, so what? Like, I'm not paying for Warhammer Plus. I can tell you that right now. Like, that's not happening. There's no world where I pay for Warhammer Plus. Give me a break, okay? No.
Yeah.
No.
The value is consistently just not there.
No, I don't even pay for streaming services that literally add new shows every day. It's like I pay for every streaming service, right? So I'm certainly not paying for whatever this is, and it's like 7 animations and some figure once a year. Give me a break, okay?
But Vince, you can only get that figure through the app, through Warhammer Plus.
Or eBay or any of 100 other places. Yeah, but sure.
Don't be ridiculous.
Yeah. Yep. And I agree. Willard says if there's a competitor out there, they'll be forced to improve. I mean, sure, I guess. Then it'll be our job to boost the signal on those competitors to make sure everybody knows about it, because the problem is a competitor, it's a David and Goliath situation. People will just, by default, be able to find this app, won't be aware of things like new recruit or stuff like that. And if this sucks, then we will just find better solutions and we'll boost the signal on them. Like, that's what it comes down to. So
yeah, like I didn't download the 3rd edition app until they fixed their formats and their outputs. I used War Scroll Builder, but obviously that's not an option. There are methods of making it known that you don't care about this.
Yep. Exactly. Okay. So, one last shout out. Hey, everybody. It's still 3.0, but did you know that Worlds is happening right now? The Age of Sigmar Worlds Team Championship. Now, as a matter of fact, today, and this is happening over in Europe, so this is already done. Quite a bit. They were done much earlier in the day. But today and tomorrow is the singles tournament. And then, of course, the big World Team Championship this Friday through Sunday. You can find everything streaming over on Twitch TV/The Honest Wargamer. Rob is over there doing some live coverage. Super cool stuff. They're in Amsterdam, right? That's where this is all happening, I think.
I believe so, yeah.
Which is funny because I believe this weekend is also the MTG, like the Magic the Gathering.
Oh, you're right.
Big event.
It
And
is.
that's also in Amsterdam. So, man, I was in Amsterdam like 2 weeks ago. None of this crap was happening. I picked the wrong time, or week and a half or whatever. Boy, I should have I needed to reorient my trip or something, I guess. Should have complained to my workplace that they weren't aligning everything. So, anyways, check out Worlds. Obviously, there's a lot of amazing people, a lot of amazing teams and players. Now, obviously, it's still 3.0, but it's super fun to follow. Rob does amazing coverage, amazing live coverage of these games. So do go check it out. The actual World Team Championship starts on Friday.
Yep.
And so I hope people will go and give that a watch, follow everything. There's a lot of people, a lot of judges that work really hard to bring this all together, and it's just an incredible event. So, yeah, there you go. All right. And hey, wouldn't you know it, that brings us to the end of the news. Brendan, let's talk about some pick of the week. What would you like to share with everybody?
I mean, we kind of already talked about mine a little bit. The death of civilized society. Again, pouring one out for the death of War Scroll Builder. I mean, that's, again, can't talk about how important that was to the community right from the outset. It's one of the things that I think has really made AOS special is individuals' willingness to commit time and effort, and in some case, their professional expertise to making the whole experience better, even in the absence of the support from Games Workshop. So, not enough good things can be said about Tony P and what he's done and the folks who have helped him over the years.
Absolutely. Give him a shout out on Twitter. I saw a lot of people were shouting out Tony P on Twitter, thanking him and stuff. But add to the chorus. Let the man know how much he's improved all of our lives. I will throw his Twitter down in the show notes so people can see it. Okay, for myself, folks, have you ever thought to yourself, I want to hear a man with an excellent voice describe in incredible detail, intermingled with memes and other funny comments, every faction-focused review article? Well, then Halo and SJ Arcade have just the solution for you. With, as SJ put together, 20 hours of Halo's faction-focused article review into a single video and uploaded it to Halo Plus. That's right. You too can put Halo on, go to sleep, wake up, potentially spend the majority of your day, and then go back to sleep and still be listening to Halo. So that's exciting. Just make sure that the ogre part happens when you're awake, because you won't sleep through the ogre part, truly. At any rate, yeah, that's my pick of the week. An absolutely mad lad video, 21 hours or whatever. Yeah, it's
too easy.
It's great. It's great.
Is it a man who asks himself, is it enough content?
Right. Absolutely. Truly just the biggest of contents. Yes. Okay. Well, with that, let's move on to some hobby time. Brendan, what have you been painting up, man? What's on your desk? What are you working on?
Not terribly much. I have not been a very good hobbyist, mostly since I got finished playing for High Ground Blue Sky back in April when I painted a corn army in like a month. I've been just kind of miscellaneously building Cruel Boys. I've got some Sylvaneth Gossamed Archers on my desk. Nothing really in particular. I was really hoping that like a faction focus would really light me on fire, and we'd go after that. There's a couple that were interesting, but not enough where in the preview itself I was like, "Yep, all right, so I've got a bunch of unpainted ones of those. Like, let's
go.
Let's go crazy." And I should be using this time to just kind of paint whatever, because obviously nothing is good right now.
Sure.
Because nothing exists.
Yeah, nothing is good and everything is good. It all exists in the liminal state of goodness.
Exactly. And I should be using that time to just paint whatever rather than what I normally end up doing, which is prioritizing the super filthy units for the super filthy armies to make super filthy lists.
Sure.
To go and try and win some awards. But no, I've just been kind of playing video games, I think is what
That's
I filled
fine.
the void with.
Look, it's going to hit. It's going to hit and come like a wave, like the breaking of a dam, and it will wash over you and carry you away. And so you have to be ready. Use these times, these moments of respite, of peace, to gather yourself and refocus before the deluge takes you, I say. That's what I say.
Well, that's what I needed, an enabler.
There you go. Absolutely. For me, and this may surprise you, I've been painting Skaven. I know everybody is shocked. But yes, I can in fact finally say that what I've been painting is Skaven. Now here's my plan with Skaven. Okay? I want to paint the best looking Skaven army in the country. So that's it. Okay? Now, to do that, I'm going to paint each Skaven individually. One rat. One rat at a time. Okay?
Why?
Because these aren't to be speed painted. Each little rat is to be cherished and loved and lavished attention on. I got my little sexy gogs right here next to me all the time. Get that fine detail. We're not messing around. We're not messing around. I ordered extra little fine brushes just to make sure I was ready to go. Okay? So you might ask yourself, what Skaven are you on? I am currently on Skaven number 4. He's right here. Which I feel good about. That's pretty good progress. Each one of these guys has taken maybe, I'm going to be generous and say like 6 hours. It might be a little more. But I think I'm spending about 6 hours per rat. And that feels pretty doable. Okay? If I could continue at that pace, I can get there. So, now some of the bigger guys are going to take more time, obviously. But 6 hours per clan rat, that's 240 hours for the unit of 40, right? So that's 6 work weeks. I think that seems reasonable. That's reasonable.
I'm glad someone feels that it's reasonable.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't.
But it's like some of them are easier because you get more per, right? I primed up the big rat ogres today. I'm going to work on them at some point. Those guys, I just realized I left one of the dumb gems sticking out of this guy's back because I didn't notice it to cut it down. So I may shave that off and reprime this dude because that bothers me. I hate the gems embedded in their skin. It's gross. But all the rest of them are good. I shaved everybody else down. And they look awesome. So, you get them 3 rat ogres down. That's a big accomplishment, right? So if you can limit them to about 6 to 8 hours, that's good. That's a week and you feel like you got a good unit. But we're going to keep working. I'm saving the characters for myself. Those are my rewards. When I get to certain milestones, I'll work on the cooler, bigger things, So...
well, I look forward to seeing this army on the table in roughly 2073.
The question is, can I make it by NashCon? And the answer is probably no.
No, absolutely not.
But can I make it by Holy Havoc? And the answer to that is almost certainly yes, because there I only need 1,000 points. So there I can probably be ready.
Yeah, as opposed to the event in August, that is 2 lists. Yeah, super easy things.
Yeah, no problem. Look, there's a holiday next month. I got a whole day off. I mean, you never know what you can do. So it's just like it's a lot of extra time.
It's 6 clan rats.
Yeah, that could be an additional 4 rats that day if I really buckle in. So that's pretty nice. No big deal. Look, I had a buddy, who played EverQuest, and this is I was over at his house in the early 2000s. And he still played EverQuest regularly, and I was like, "How long? What do you got? What do you got time played on this character. This is like his main, and he like hit / played or whatever, and it was like 1 year and 36 days, and that's real time. That's time he had been logged in, actively playing this character, right? And this is like maybe 2002, let's say. I don't know, something like that probably, right? So my point is that like, hey, you can it's amazing how much time you can spend on something if you really just kind of keep working at it, just one nail at a time, just keep hammering. Okay.
Yep. So true. Sure.
I know what I just said is insane, but look, I love these guys. And I'm honestly, the funny part is I'm having a great time painting these Skaven. I just really like them. They're just really good. It hasn't bothered me yet. So there you go. All right. With that, Brendan, are you ready?
Yeah.
Let's do this.
Let's talk about 4th edition.
4th edition. Okay. So, I do love that they decided for their like teaser image to use the hope cast into ruin. Like, guys, that's not gonna look good when people use this art going forward. They're like, you're just setting yourself up if your edition isn't an absolute banger, right? For the meta story to be like, yep, you sure did. But at any rate, that's not the case. I actually really, really like this edition. So before we flip to some of the high-level overview stuff, Brendan, what do you think right now? Like, where are you sitting vis-a-vis this edition? What are you thinking, given with the rules and everything right now? Excited, not excited, happy, not happy, looking forward to playing, that kind of thing. Where are you sitting?
Yeah, looking forward to seeing the specifics, right? Because this is the framework that all the indexes will operate within. So the core rules kind of give you a sneak peek into the perspective of Matt and the team as to how they approach some of these problems. Going through it reads a lot like a code of regulations. It's numbered. The numbers build on each other. They reference back to each other. We obviously saw that really introduced in 3rd edition. This is taken to a whole different level. So on the first read through, it feels very simple. But the longer you spend time with those rules, the more complicated that rule set is. And I think my expectation is that it's going to be more complicated than folks are maybe expecting.
100%.
I certainly had a 15-minute long exchange about how passive abilities work and when they become passive and how that interacts, and they become continuation of effects and strikes first, strikes last, and you have to get all the way down to 28.1, which references this, and then it's back in 19, and then it steps back into 5.
Yep.
I mean, those arguments are going to exist, and that's going to be interesting. I'm going to be very interested to see how that plays out in event space, where 2 very prepared players, it's going to be not a big deal. But I think when you have folks, a person who does understand and a person who thinks they understand, that's going to create a very interesting couple of minutes at the table, I would think. But
I agree.
Overall, really like that the keyword mechanics are in there. The once per timing can be really confusing. Plastic Crack, in their article this last week, did a really good job of explaining at a high level how the different kinds work. You have units and armies, and you, the player, use abilities, and that's
which we're going to talk about.
That's going to be a bit of a change. But at the 10,000 foot level, I think it's an overall improvement. And there are definitely some pain points that are going to create some interesting experiences at the table between players, especially when understanding isn't quite lined up. And my hope and fear, is that's really kind of how Old World works, where the player who knows the most is the one who is usually going to guide the direction,
Yep.
which, mixed bag on that one sometimes.
Yep. Now, my read of this is I'm very excited for this. I think this is the simplest to get into, but the hardest to master. Like, this will be the most skill testing edition of AOS by far. Okay, that's my read. And the reason it's going to skill test is because of the reactivity and all of that kind of stuff. No, you do not need to watch a how. We are going to talk in layman's terms. Okay, we're not gonna. You're not going to need to watch something else. Okay, we're going to break this down. Like we're gonna talk. As always, I am a dummy. I consider myself a simple person, and so I brought Brendan in because he's a better player than I. Okay, that's just the simple reality of the thing. So I needed the strategic mind here as well. But I'm going to be here. We're going to be breaking this down into the simple stuff. But I do think that skill expression will be a much, much bigger deal in this edition than in any previous edition. Not just because of the interactivity or some of the nuance of the rules, but also because of, as we'll see, the way that like damage actually works in this and stuff like that. Like understanding what your enemy's units can do, making sure you get the right matchups. Because like if you put, as I'll talk about later, if you put your unit that's properly synergized into its prime target, you're gonna blow that thing up. It will die. It just will die. If you get it into something else, if you make the wrong pick, if you put them in a wrong position and they get flat-footed, you're done. That fight's there forever. It's never they've gummed up your unit. You're never fighting your way out of it because damage is much lower overall.
Or you're just going to lose. Right.
You'll just rock your whole plan. Okay, enough hoity-toity high-level 40,000-foot view. I once had somebody quote me on using 40,000-foot view, and they were like, "I've never heard that before." Who's never heard that before? I've used that forever. Have I spent this long in business that people are like, are the kids not saying, "Give it to me from a 40,000-foot view" anymore? That's pretty obvious what it means.
I think it's an inflation term. So we either say 100,000 or 10,000 foot view. We can't afford 40. It's not,
40,000-foot view in this economy? Are you crazy? Okay. Got it. All right. Overview. Here we go. Let's get into the overview stuff. Number 1, if you're familiar with 3.0, you're familiar with AOS 4.0 at a high level. The core functions, things like moving, rolling to hit, wounding, and such, haven't changed in large enough ways to make them foreign. The primary loop of the game, the way it plays, the way your units act, the stuff on their war scroll, is still largely the same. You are already quite familiar with that. That all being said, okay, the game feels a lot different in play. Okay, like you're gonna read it, it's gonna seem the same to you, and then you're gonna play it, and it's gonna be like, wow, this is very different. Yeah. Okay. Number 1, the interactivity is real. Like many preconceived tactical notions that you have, if you use them, are wrong and will lose you the game. Okay? Like, you will make decisions based on how you understand things to work in 3.0. And those do not work like that anymore, and you will lose because you made that decision. That will happen. Okay? And there's lots of changes to the nuance level, like lots of quality of life improvements, but also little tricks. Okay, so Brendan, what do you think about this? Of my first page of overview here, you think I'm in the right place here?
Yeah, I agree with that pretty strongly. Certainly getting the chance to listen to some Man Reed's book and the different previews we have there. It feels familiar, but it's not the same. And I think so much of the not the sameness comes in play with the specific keywords and how we found out that they interact with other rules within the game and how you use it and when you use it and what it actually means. Mm-hmm. Certainly that 4th bullet point, the interactivity being real, I think it's gonna be a big change for folks, where it's active player resolves all theirs, and then the non-active player resolves all of theirs. So that's stepping in that sequencing where I know from a competitive place, I'm really used to just kind of announcing start of phase, actual phase, end of phase, and I'm very used to that cadence. You know, you have start of the battle round, start of turn, but then it's right into hero phase. I do all my stuff, and then I go, okay, Vince, hero phase to you.
Right.
Um,
Right.
Getting into that cadence of having that stopping point is going to be a big adjustment, I think, for a lot of people. It's just a different speed. And then the other thing that I think is really going to trip people up is these rules are written unlike any Games Workshop set of rules that you have ever seen in the history of Games Workshop. It is written in kind of a rules and procedural style of writing, and that certainly my first pass through felt really uncomfortable, and certainly increased the amount of time it's taken to process that information. It's very clear, but only once you understand it.
That's right.
I think.
Yeah, let me make this real for everybody. By the way, Alessandro said, any thoughts on if this will make the game shorter? No, I really don't think so. I do not think this game will be any shorter. Honest answer. Because the major thing that takes time is a bunch of dice rolling, and that ostensibly hasn't changed, or is just as much. There's a couple little things that got quicker, but for the most part, no. Maybe in the end it'll fall slightly, like 10 minutes, but that would be my guess. At any rate, here's a fun thing. I'll give you an example of a preconceived notion that'll lose you the game. It used to be the case often you'd charge in, right? And you'd end your charge, and then like you'd be like, okay, I'm gonna make sure I end, like this is some other unit I don't want to fight, right? Like it's a bad unit you don't want to fight. And you charge in here to fight this unit, okay? And you're like, well, I'm gonna make sure I end my charge outside of 3 inches of this other unit, so they can't get at me, right? I'm safe from them, okay? Safe. You were. But if they have 2 command points and that's a hammer unit, they're just going to be like, cool, okay, are you done with all your charges? Countercharge. Bam, 3-inch charge. I'm in. Or 3, because if you're that close, right? If you're hugging the line, if you're at 3.1, right? And so, like, nope, that unit's in combat. So it can often be beneficial for you to just pull them in, tag them in, and just be like, yeah, they're in here, and you kind of lock them in place. Sometimes that's the right choice. Is just to like let them be in the combat, right? So that way they can't get charging bonuses against you, because if they countercharge, they charged. And if you have some hammer that like has a bunch of bonuses on charging and you let them charge you or countercharge you, as it were, it's like it's gonna feel bad, and suddenly your unit's gonna die, and you're not gonna understand why. So there you go. Okay, so that's my thoughts there. All right, next overview page. Insights. So now I want to move into insights. Okay, these are things that I think that I've learned from my experiences with 4.0 thus far. Okay, in the rules, in the games I've got to experience, and so on. Okay, and these are really important to internalize. Number 1, it is very easy to fail battle tactics because of the counterplay. Very easy. We're going to talk about battle tactics later on. We'll see the ones on offer in the core rules, which carry over into the season, as we've seen. And a lot of them say things like, have 2 units in the center of the board and don't be in combat, or something like that, or whatever, or have no one near you, right? Okay. Well, when you move into a place, you have to be aware that people could redeploy against you. That's always been the case. But this time they're redeploying at the end of your movement. They get to watch all of your movement happen and then make a decision. They can countercharge against you.
Yeah, and that's good and bad.
Sure.
You know.
Sure. It means you could steer or cleave off the areas they may be able to redeploy, right? You could kind of block things off. They can countercharge against you. They have options of like power through, where they power back if they which could happen, right? Like they charged and they could suddenly be off and then back away from you or go over top of you or something like that. A lot of armies will end up with abilities and stuff like that that will are going to do the same thing. Now we're going to talk about armies specifically tonight. We'll do that obviously in the future once they release all the PDFs and stuff. But like, there's just like the core rules have lots of counterplay, and armies continue this concept, right? So that's my first point. Like, it's just battle tactics and all those kinds of things. Like, a lot of the times you'll read a battle tactic and you'll think in 3.0 terms, you're like, oh, it's very easy to accomplish. In 4.0 terms, it's not. And we'll talk about that more in detail later. You will feel the variance in stats. There is lots and lots of 4+ to hit and so on and things like that, right? And penalties to hurt, or penalties to hit really hurt. Like we've seen already in the previews. They talked about this. They laid down, they said, this is the new stats for things. And they have a wide variance. And that's going to be real, right? Because when everybody's on 4s, there's so many people on 4s, and all of a sudden there's a lot of armies with neg 1s or something like that, it's just going to be prevalent, whatever. The variance is meaningful, is the point. Like, it's a thing.
Yeah, and with something like that, having crit auto wound becomes really valuable.
Right.
Certainly the expectations that they've tried to manage with us, that they've gone through and set a baseline for what everything is. Certainly we were getting into profile creep in 3rd edition. We've seen it in the faction previews. 4s and 5s are numbers you see again. Like, that's
right. Yep, exactly. Little goblins, things like that. Whatever those kinds of things, or just like a lot of bruiser type things, like monsters, right? Being on 4s to hit and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The game is much less damaging, but it's a synergy and alignment game. Hit their paper with your scissors and you crush. Hit their rock with your scissors and nothing happens. Okay? Choose the wrong fight, you're stuck forever, you probably lose. It's that simple. Like, that's why I said this is going to be really skill testing. It is very much about maneuvering, about picking the right thing, about having the right fight, getting the right buffs, having the right synergies, understanding where the soft underbelly of the targets are, and so on and so forth, right? And that's very much in the alignment. They talked about lowering the damage, getting rid of ranged mortal damage, all that kind of stuff, right? And that's all true. But it'll feel exactly the same or higher damaging if you manage to have the right synergies and line up and smack the right target. Okay. So, there you go. All right. You anything to add to my insights here, Brendan? What do you think?
Yeah, I think on the point of battle tactics is not only are they easier to counterplay against, I think reading them the first time in a vacuum, I was like, oh, these are easy. And then, the missions got posted, and yeah, some of these are going to be a little bit tougher, and some faction specific ones are more winners than others. I believe Halo pointed out pretty clearly that the Chaos ones are a piece of cake, and some of the other factions have some less easy ones.
Yes,
but
there are some definite haves and have-nots.
The missions being very standard in that it's 10 points around certainly make that interesting. We'll see how that plays out. Do you build armies to play around tactics? Do you build armies to counter your opponent's tactics to keep it to a largely objective scoring game? I don't know. That's going to be interesting to come out on. The less damaging is so real, but it's not just you throw your scissors into your rock and you're stuck there. If you throw your scissors into the rock, like, there's a good chance you lose your unit, and that's going to be kind of a new experience outside of the occasional, like, oops, they rolled really well, or wow, that was really dumb. It's just, oh no, that's what that unit does.
Right.
Is it supposed to, it's anti-cav, and my cav unit, oops.
Yeah, it's an anti-cav, anti-charge unit, and I charged it with cav, and now I don't have a cav unit anymore, and they're still standing with basically no losses.
Yeah. That'll be different, right? The designed mission statement intent of rock, paper, scissors with anti-blank, that is gonna make it interesting. Hopefully there's ways to make that so that it's a dynamic meta and it doesn't just sit in one place. And, let's say it's like the advent of third where it was all monsters and people were looking for ways to beat monsters, and it just kind of settled into you either ran giants or ran things that beat giants, and that was
Right.
kind of it. I would hope in something like that people would run giants and then things to beat giants, and then something in the middle that plays at the edges of those kinds of things. But I mean, really, I'm just looking to the first 4th edition tournaments and seeing how lots of other people interpret their potential solutions to the rule set.
Agreed. All right. Okay. Let's continue the insights. The ability usage is really, really clean and easy. Okay? Like, I will say, the happiest thing about my experiences so far is that using the abilities and changing things to abilities and the way you interact with these things is just clean. It's just easy. I use this ability. No response. Okay. Effect. This happens, right? Or I roll. Yes, it worked. It happens, right? And continues, repeats. I use all my abilities. Okay, I have completed all of my movement phase abilities. Brendan, as the inactive player, do you have any movement phase abilities you'd like to use? Or so on and so forth, right? Just like
Right.
getting in that habit of passing it over. It's clean, and really, like, really, really, really easy to learn. I will say that. Like, it's so smooth. What was in the past very complicated stuff, just smooth and easy. So I like that.
Yeah, I certainly, we're going to get into however 1,000 war scrolls it is and all their abilities. I'm sure there will be some very unique, clunky interactions, but obviously the team over the years has demonstrated a willingness to address and work on those. So hopefully, as those get found, that they're corrected and eliminated pretty quickly.
Yep. All right, my next insight. You will have less heroes. Okay? Like, this is just patently true from the beginning. So first off, you're limited to 5 regiments. Heroes equal drops almost 1-to-1. We'll talk about army building in a little while. Like, that's part of the rules we'll get to in army construction. We're gonna deep dive in the rules, but I wanted to start with the insights. Like, basically a hero equals a drop. Not always, but most of the time. And the real war is now, like, 1 drop is gone. Okay? But the new war is between 2 and 3 drops. Right? That's where it'll settle. And being able to choose first turn is still very powerful. You look at the battle tactic list, you look at what they've released, and we'll, like I said, we'll talk about it, the ones that are in the core rules later. And it's not like the faction ones don't change that any. First turn battle tactics are limited, especially in some maps. Very limited. There's a couple of like suicide battle tactics you can do, and that are just like, hey, did you want to lose this game? Try this battle tactic. And so, like, being able to decide who goes first is powerful. And it's still, and that connects intrinsically to my next point, which is the double turn is still really, really powerful. And in fact, you might want it more. I like, so that the whole trick with the double turn in this edition is you take the double, you don't get to score a battle tactic. Who cares? Who cares? My answer is you take the double, you ignore the battle tactic, you break their back, and then you're the underdog, potentially for 2 turns in a row. As you just mop up whatever they have and inevitably are on the upswing to win the game. Like, I actually think you might be more incentivized in this edition to take the double and ignore the battle tactic, because you can almost auto score underdog in that way. Now, tournaments, maybe it's different. Maybe there's battle tactics things that make you want to go 5 for 5 or something. I don't know. I don't think people will go 5 for 5 very often. I think people will often drop battle tactics, even at high levels of play. So I don't think that that's as much a thing. I think you can kind of afford to drop one, especially if, like, you know, you've got no good choices on the turn. And as long as you get your other 4, you're good to go. So it just really depends. I think you could probably chart it out to be in 4 of 5. I don't think battle tactics should personally be part of tournament separation and scoring anyways. I think that's always been dumb and led to bad outcomes. So that's not how we should try to fix this. But at any rate, these are my 2 insights. What do you think about these 2?
Yeah, the battle for being a 2-drop is going to be interesting. Trying to think about, armies as roughly presently constructed, what kind of drops they would fit into. Obviously, not knowing the way that everything sorts itself out. But like, I had a Corn Demon army, I took to High Ground Brute Sky. Conceivably, those things would obviously support each other. But that list, at present construction would be a 4-drop. I don't know how good that is.
Right.
As the minimum. Now, one of the things that we saw as we got the chance to read this is that in deployment you can deploy your battle regiments as 1-drop, or you can drop them all as individuals, which is an interesting choice. And certainly if your opponent is playing 2,000 points of Doom Wheels, you get to know where more of those Doom Wheels go. But I really think most armies, like you said, Vince, are going to fit in that 2 to 3 drop category. And if you're not going to fit in that category, you're just going to want to go as wide as possible.
Right. And even then, you'll end up being capped very quickly at like sort of 5 heroes, because that's just, you can't have more than 5 regiments. Like, that's just
you can rule. Right, but you take auxiliaries, and
sure.
we can.
Yeah, you could you could go nuts with auxiliaries, but again, I'm gonna talk about that in a minute as well. One thing I'll say about auxiliaries is forget they exist. Just auxiliaries don't exist. Forget that's a thing. They don't exist. Stop it. You're never gonna take an auxiliary. People won't take auxiliaries. Auxiliaries aren't real. That's there for jokey meme lists. It and end. That's it, and that's all.
I really look forward to the person that runs like a basically all auxiliaries list, because one unit is just too powerful and there's nobody that can stop it, and you just hand your opponent the extra command point and tell them good luck. I think that'll be really cool to see the one time it happens.
Yep.
But yeah, your point on the double turn I think is interesting. The ability to get the underdog, which is like literally on your next slide, is just too easy in too many cases, and the rules that you get for it are just too strong. It is going to be in some situations the correct decision to drop the points, keep the rules, and double bottom of 1 into 2 and go for a backbreaker turn.
Right.
Ideally, you have to set up for that, but
you had a whole bottom of 1 to set up. Like, if you're taking the 1, you can cause some incidental damage, but what you've really done is put yourself in the position to have every matchup you want, and then you get the double, and then you just break them.
Yeah. So, I agreed mostly on those points, so I think that brings us to the next slide of underdog is too good and too easy.
Absolutely. I want to answer a few questions in the chat now. Darius, I'm wondering if armies like FEC will have rules that let them take more heroes by having courtiers join regiments. Yeah, I mean, like, again, we'll talk about that with army review, but yes, like, there are some things that'll join other things and so on. That's why I said it's almost 1-to-1, but not exactly, so that's fine. And our basic foot hero, Morty said, our basic foot hero is truly dead, or are they useful now? No, they're definitely not dead. You don't have to worry about that. Okay. So yeah. Okay. David Campbell, do auxiliaries solve a problem? No. They're not a thing. It doesn't exist. They're not real. Forget they exist. Okay? They're not real. It does not exist. Again, I'm not going to talk about the armies, but I want to put it in your head right now. No. It's not real. No, there's no secret thing. I'm not telling you. They aren't real. Okay. Cool. Let's talk about this next stuff. Underdog is often too easy and too good. Biggest problem. Every time Age of Sigmar introduces some brand new thing, it's bent at the onset, at the jump. The first version of it just feels like it's bent every time. And here we are again. Hello, darkness, my old friend. Okay? It is so easy to become the underdog, even when you're in the dominant position in the game. Like, you are dominating the board, and yet somehow you become the underdog. And it's like, hey, bonus command points and extra free stuff for me. Woo!
Well, and sometimes the rules are for being underdog are just unbelievable.
Right.
Like, some of them are like, you get to re-roll, something, and you go, okay, cool, neat. I'll just take the CP and move on with my life. But like one of them is you get +1 to hit, +1 to wound against enemy units that are that meet a certain criteria. Yeah, sign me up. Sounds great.
Massive. Yeah, exactly. There's a bunch of stuff like this, right? And it's just like, even the bonus command point is really impactful, because command points are like, it is true that the command point economy is very restricted. Like, that is absolutely a thing. There is a notable exception we'll talk about in a few weeks, but a couple of notable exceptions, but for the most part, it's very true. And it's just like way too good. It's just way too good and way too easy. The number of times I've been getting my teeth kicked in by the underdog, I'm just like, what is happening? What is happening? I'm losing this game. Clearly. If an alien came down and landed on the planet and looked at this board state and had to call who the underdog was, he would not pick my opponent, or they would not pick my opponent, whatever they are. Okay. All right. So that's number one. Number two. Get ready for a manifestation party. Whoop, whoop. Manifestation party. Whoop, whoop. They'll be everywhere, and you'll feel it when you don't have them. Manifestations are just going to be around. They're just going to be floating around. They're just keep coming back. They're like a bad penny. These dumb things just show up all over the place. Like, people need to be careful in how they use them for reasons we'll talk about later on. But like, they're just going to be around. They'll just be around. Steph and I can't talk about individual armies, buddy. I will in the future. So that's just the way it is. And then priests are way better than wizards in this edition. You can just see that from the core rules. Like, you look at what priests can do, you look at how wizards interact. It's not mathematically complicated. Counter Prey is way better than Counter Spell, or Unleash Spell is way, or Unleash Prayer is better than Unleash Spell, however you want to say it. And because you're just building up, charge. You're just, just like you're just getting that power level over 9,000, right? It's all it is. And we'll talk about priest rules in a little while. And then charging around endless spell, because endless spells are a thing now that you can fight, which is cool, like super cool. But it does also mean that, like, what's going to happen is you're going to put out an endless spell, and all you did is just let your opponent just ramp its way into your line if you're not careful, because they'll charge the endless spell, spin around it, and fight your unit. And it's just like, what happened? What just happened?
Oops.
Oops. Yeah, so that's going to be fun. A lot of people will make that mistake real quick. Shooting is definitely weaker, but still powerful. I think overall it's more in line with where it should be. And my last insight is counter charge is powerful. That's it. That's the insight. It's true. 2 command points is still a great deal for counter charge. Would buy 10 out of 10. All right. Any additional thoughts here? We already talked about the underdog thing, but what else? What else? Any thoughts on this one?
Unleash Prayer, and we saw in the Fire Slayers preview a really strong example of how powerful that interaction is. You have the Rune Master, who is Priest 2, who has an ability to enhance your runes, and you have to have successfully chanted 3 prayers to get enough points to be able to do it. The Rune Master has a prayer that they previewed that goes off on a 4. So coin flip that it goes off. Cool, that's a free point. If not, you've got enough points for the next time that you go to chant a prayer. It's right there. It's ready to go. It becomes super easy. So getting a Rune Master, it's like in a vacuum, 3 is probably tough to get to. You conceivably could get that character to 3 every battle round without too much effort. You got to order it and sequence it all right, and it's got to work. But, that's exceptional. And yeah, it's going to be really cool to see what everybody else gets. Priests for a long time have always kind of felt like they were the forgotten units in the game, and now they're not. now they've got a really cool way of interacting with everything, and I think they're going to be in good shape. Countercharge is powerful. It in many cases dictates the board space. You're going to be concerned about where your units end, where you put your units, how your units are staged for your opponent's turn. Units that fly, keeping them some distance behind the line so that they can maybe jump and countercharge. And I really like, though, that they went with the design choice of making that 2 command points. I think that's going to be a really cool design space as the game develops, of creating command points that are worth 2 points or 3 points or maybe even potentially 4 points, right? If there's a command that is a game winner,
yeah, that would truly
going to magic terms and triggering your planeswalkers -10 ult,
right.
that
your ult
puts you in the place to win the game. Like, yeah, like I would love to see that. Give me the clockwork army that you've lined it all up and the sequence comes together and boom, like
and then the dominoes fall. Yeah.
I would play the heck out of that army. Like, be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say on the whole, I think they have, a bit of praise here to end the insight section. It's just that I think they have done. I think clearly one of their design goals with this edition was to refocus the game into that sort of tactical melee combat, where you're needing to think carefully about how you move, how your opponent's going to move in response to that, how you charge, how they're going to countercharge, like all these sorts of things, and making it really this interactive melee focused experience where you're trying to get your, as I've said, your hammer, your scissors into their paper, right, and avoid their rock. And to do that, you have to make shooting weaker. You just do, because shooting is the ultimate. It's the nuclear bomb in the rock paper scissors, right? It's just like, no, it just beats everything, right, or whatever. I guess bomb beats paper and rock, but scissors cuts the thing. But it's too strong. Anyways, the point is that I think they have done a good job of weakening it out in the right way, where it's not going to be in such a dominant state, and it really does become a more melee focused game. So I think that they have done a good job of like hitting that design principle. Okay. Core rules. Now that the insights are over, let's get into the nitty and the gritty of the core rules. All right. Boom. Okay, and I'm actually starting with what I think is the most important thing to understand, and that is section 28. So, just way at the end. Just way at the end. This is like 2 pages from the end of the rules. Okay. Important insights. Who is using the ability matters, especially when understanding once per X versus once per X army. This text, I was wrong then. I thought, well, Willard, that's not what it said on the thing. Okay, sorry, Kathy, you're completely right. I was wrong. I apologize. I love you. Okay. Anyways, so maybe I am in Chicago that weekend or whatever. All right. At any rate, thank you, Willard. My Google foo let me down. Okay, who is using the ability? This sidebar over here is so important, but I'm going to break it down for you. We're going to make this really easy, okay? I promise you, we're going to make this really easy. Here we go. While abilities on War Scrolls are always used by the unit whose War Scroll it is, so that's our first thing. If the ability is on a War Scroll, it's used by that unit. Okay? Everybody with me so far? It's on a War Scroll. It's used by that unit. Questions answered. 1-to-1. Great. Okay. Some abilities that do not appear on War Scrolls will tell you explicitly to pick a unit to use the ability. In both cases, it should be clear which unit is using the ability. Boy, that should is doing some heavy lifting. Some abilities that do not appear on War Scrolls, most commonly enhancements, see army composition, blah, blah, are given to certain units in your army. In such cases, the unit to which the enhancement was given is the one using the ability. Okay, cool. So enhancement grants an ability to the unit, they use it. Got it. Okay. Abilities that neither appear on a war scroll nor tell you to pick a unit to use the ability are used by you, the player. So you, the player, will use the ability. And here's how you know if it's the unit using it or if it's the player using it. Okay? When you look at the ability, does it say in the declare, pick a unit to use this ability, or some text like that? Okay? If it does, then the unit's using the ability. If it says, make a dice roll, this happens. Or if it says, choose a thing to be a target, okay, then it's you, the player, using the ability. Because you're picking the target. You're rolling the dice. That's it. It's all, I hate that this exists, but this is the way it is. Okay? It's literally in the nuance of that text. Does it tell you the unit uses this ability in the text, or does it say declare a target or do this thing? Okay? Again, unless it's on a war scroll. That's right. What we're talking about here is for those abilities that aren't on war scrolls. Okay? I will give you all an example that's out there in the public that has been spoiled. They talked about they showed the Ironjaw's Wa. Okay? And the Ironjaw's Wa was once per battle in your charge phase, I think is when you use it. I don't remember off the top of my head. But anyways, once per battle, charge phase. Let's say that's what it was. And then the immediate question was, well, can every one of my heroes use the ability? Answer, no. Okay? Because if you read the declare, it says you pick one of your Ironjaw's heroes to be the target. So you, the player, are using the ability. So we know that. Okay, now let's go to the once per timings, 28.2. The timing part of some abilities says once per phase, once per turn, or once per battle. If the ability is used by a unit, it can be used a maximum of one time in that phase, turn, or battle by each unit that can use the ability. If the ability is used by a player, it can be used a maximum of one time in that timing window by that player. What does that mean? Okay, here's what it means. What does the Ironjaw's Wa say? It says once per battle. Who uses the ability? You, the player. How many times can you, the player, use a once per battle ability? Once. Each thing can do it once per, right? If it's a unit doing it, then once per battle, each unit could do it. Okay. If it's the unit that actively uses it. If it's the player, you get to use the ability once. Ravni says, I hate this so much. Ravni, I understand. I hate this so much too. Okay? I really do. Okay? This is going to be a thing that trips people up. That's why I'm trying to explain it here. So, in simplest terms, if it's on a war scroll or has been granted by an enhancement, it's used by that unit. If it's some other ability like your battle trait and it's once per, you need to read the text and say, is it telling you the unit is doing it, or is it telling you to just do it? In which case it's you, the player, doing it, and then you heed the once per timing. Okay. All right. Brendan, did I miss anything there on that?
No, and I think in the chat, the illustration between the Ironjaw's battle trait and the Daughters of Cain battle trait is a great example of how this works differently, where, as you pointed out, the Ironjaw's trait is army, used by player. The Daughters of Cain battle trait ends up being a used by unit. And so as long as you meet the requirements, that ability can be used every turn by a different unit. But you can't do multiples in the same step. You're still in that limiter. You nailed it. This is going to be very complicated. This is going to confuse a lot of people. I fully expect the early parts of this edition to be really frustrating as people, understand that interaction, as well as the concept of your opponent or any.
Yep.
That's those are the other triggers that I think are really gonna get people a little messed up on this.
Yep. And Branu Mate said player keyword or something would have helped make it really obvious who was using the ability. I agree. I wish in the abilities. There you go, Matt. GW design team, little note for you for 5.0. Maybe add to the abilities used by unit or player. Maybe add that in the ability. Hey, wouldn't that be a neat, easy additional piece of text to add that would clarify this whole nonsense? So, at any rate, yeah, there you go. That's how that works. Okay. There you are. So hopefully that makes it a little more clear to everybody. I understand it's complicated. I understand it's kind of a nightmare. It's really, I cannot explain this enough. The nuance is in the text of the declare, where it says either pick a unit to do this, or the unit does this, or something like that, right? If it has that kind of text and it's not on a war scroll or not an enhancement, then it's you, the player, who's doing it, right? Okay. All right. So the other notable thing on this page to understand is persisting effects. It is worth mentioning before we leave when we get to the rules of war. Okay.
Yes.
So some abilities have effects that aren't immediately resolved, e.g. add 1 to save rolls for this unit for the rest of the turn, or this unit has a ward 5+ for the rest of the turn. Sure. Very common abilities. These things are all over the place. They're buffs. It's just buffs, right? We all know these are buffs. Okay.
But what kind of buff, Vince?
Yes. Well, these effects count as the effects of a passive ability for their duration, which is actually super important in the rules because you're using an active ability that's creating a passive ability, and as we get to with the core, passives never stack. So this is actually the section that's stopping you from like layering multiples of these things on of the same name or same effect on people. Okay. All right. I wanted to start with this because I do think this is the most confusing thing in the entire rule set. I really think the rest is very clean, but this is confusing as just as insert word here.
And of course it's at the end, right? So you read through the document with a certain level of understanding, and you get to the end, and this kind of changes the way that I read it.
Right. Yep, exactly. So that's why we started here. I know it's weird to start at the end, but I wanted to start here. Thank you all who's with me. If you stuck with me to this point and you didn't lose your mind or immediately have some kind of aneurysm, like if in the chat just the letter T just pops up repeatedly, I'll know that we broke somebody's brain and they just passed out on their keyboard. Okay. All right. Okay, cool. All right. Boom. Next up. Next important insight before we get into the specific rules. Manifestations. Oh boy. Now we could also lump faction terrain in here because it works sort of similarly. But we're going to do this through the manifestations lens because this is going to be the most, like, as I said, these things are going to be all over the freaking place. Okay. Manifestations, the way to think about them is they're only interactive during certain phases. So I'm going to read these bullets, but then I'm going to simplify it for everybody. Here we go. Manifestations. They are treated as if they were units for the purposes of movement, combat range, being in combat, and setting up other units. Units can finish a charge move within half an inch of an enemy manifestation as if it were a unit. Okay, what does that mean? Well, it means that when you move near an angry manifestation, you have to heed its combat range. You can't move within 3 inches of it, right? That's movement. It has a combat range. It's 3 inches. Being in combat. If you're next to the dumb thing, you're in combat with it. Hence, you can't charge now, right? And if you can charge the thing, as I mentioned earlier. People are just going to like toss out a manifestation in front of their line, and then the enemy's going to charge that thing and then pile around that thing and then hit somebody behind it because they can effectively get 6 inches out of that, right? Plus their charge. If they have melee or ranged weapons, they can use the fight and shoot core abilities as if they were units. Okay, simple enough. They can still fight and shoot. Sure, they have profiles. Got it. Okay. If they have a move characteristic greater than 0, they can use core move abilities as if they were units. Okay, fair enough. They can be picked as the targets of enemy abilities as if they were units. They are not affected by enemy abilities that do not involve picking targets. So, if you have a spell that says pick a point, or sorry, pick a unit and do D3 mortals to it, right? Like an Arcane Bolt style unit. You can pick a manifestation and shoot it. But if you have something that just says like everybody within 6 inches of you takes D3 mortal wounds or something like that, the manifestation doesn't get hit by that. It ignores PBAOEs. Okay. Okay.
Clear as mud. You got it.
Got it. Okay. So, yes, a fun little idiosyncrasy there. Damage points can be inflicted on them as if they were units and they can be destroyed. Sure, they have a health. They can die. Okay. Manifestations that have a move characteristic of 0 dash cannot move for the purposes of movement, combat range, being in combat, and setting up other units. They are only treated as if they were units in the charge phase and the combat phase. By the by, I imagine this will change to be just the combat phase. But, okay. So now, I'm going to answer your questions, Branu. Can you deep strike near faction terrain and manifestations? Let's leave faction terrain out of this for a minute. Let's talk about manifestations. Yes, but only if they're static, right? So if they're static, then you're only treating them for these purposes, for setting up other units. They only are treated as if they are units in the charge and combat phase. In other words, if you're setting up in the movement phase, they're not a unit. Okay, so you can set up.
You can set right on top of them, basically. You know,
Right.
You can be 0.0001 inches away from that model.
Correct. But if it's a what we would think of as like a predatory endless spell, right? If it's one that has a movement characteristic, then it has a 9-inch bubble around it that's going to hedge out your setup or whatever. If it says set up 9 inches away from enemy units, you got to set up 9 inches away from it. It'll block you out, same as anything else. Okay? So like gnashing jaws or whatever will block you out of being able to set up near it. But like, I don't know, one that doesn't move, whatever.
Yep. Palisade.
Okay. Sure, there you go. Palisade, thank you. Will not. Right? When you get to the combat phase, then if you're still standing next to this thing, you're suddenly in combat with it. Okay? Like, you could move away from it in the movement phase. If you're near one with a move of 0, you can walk away from it. It's not holding you in combat because it's not a unit in the movement phase. If you're near a predatory one that moves around, you're now in combat. You can't move away from it. You're locked in. Okay? Got you for 3 minutes. Okay? Models can move through manifestations but cannot end a move on them. Okay? Ben Staffordson says, I hate manifestations already. Okay. Okay. So, let's talk about what this actually means in practice, right? Because, like, I want to simplify this down for people. Because this sounds pretty complicated, but I'll say, in practice, it's not actually too bad. It's confusing to read the text. I am fully in agreement. Okay? But I'm going to answer they're like basically explain this. And Brendan, I'm curious for your thoughts here if you think I summarized this well. If it's go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is like just like the last thing we talked about. This is going to take some time getting used to. This is going to be a really frustrating thing early on to get around. To the point that I would recommend, probably in your first couple of games, just don't use manifestations. Learn the rules of the game. Couple games in, toss manifestations on, then get used to that.
Agreed 100%. Okay, so let's take an example of two different manifestations. So we'll use like Jaws and the Palisade. Okay, you throw the Palisade out there in front of you. Your opponent can walk straight up to the Palisade and walk around it, because I think the Palisade says that you can't walk over it or whatever, so they can just walk straight around it. Right? Okay. They moved around it. They walked up and then walked over here. No problem. It has no move value. It wasn't a unit when they moved near it. Doesn't interact with their movement. They could drop a unit and set up right next to it. Now they can't move after that. There's a core rule that stops moving, period, if you've used a setup ability. But at any rate, they could set up right next to it, whatever they want to do. However, if it was gnashing jaws out there, angry Pac-Man, right? Then you would, if you moved around it, you'd have to heed its combat range, so move around 3 inches, just like anything else. You can't get into combat range. If you want to get near it, you got to charge it. Okay, and if you try to set up, you got to set up at least 9 inches away from it. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So far so good.
Yep. Darius, can I manifest a moving manifestation on my opponent's turn to block battle tactics that needs a unit to have no enemies nearby? Probably not is the answer. Maybe, but probably not. Because I'll explain why. Let's say the battle tactic says you can't have an enemy within 6 inches. Okay? Like, depends on what it is, I guess is the answer. Like, if you try to throw out a Jaws or whatever, you have to heed the same setup rules. So you got to set up 9 inches away from them. So your angry Jaws sets up too far away. Right? Like, it's not going to be within 6 inches. Now, it might land like a 9-inch charge or something. It's whatever. Yeah? Mm-hmm. But it has to set up, it has to heed the same setup range. Like, when it's set up, it has to also be set up the same 9 inches away. Now, a static manifestation, right? When it's set up, okay, is you're ignoring it for when it's for the purposes of movement, combat range, and setting up other units, right? So most static manifestations will say they still have to be some distance, like in the thing. They're going to say they still have to be some distance. That's the summon spell for them. Will say they still have to be some distance away from enemy units. So most of the time, the answer is no. Okay? And keep in mind, these things can only use those core abilities. They don't benefit from any other abilities. Like, you can't yell at your endless spell to countercharge or something. It won't. It doesn't do that.
As fun as it would be.
As fun as it would be. No, Cygnus, you cannot. You cannot use all-out attack. You cannot use any commands. They can only use the core abilities of move, shoot, fight. That's it. So, there you go. So, at any rate, that's really the answer to your question, Darius. Is most of the time no, because the setup thing will block you from getting there. I mean, if you unleash spell and then it lands its charge or something like that, then I suppose that's doable. But it can't countercharge, so it's not charging off turn. So I don't know what it's doing to get there. So most of the time the answer is no. Okay. All right. And then banishing. Banishing is just banishing. It's a thing you can do. You can use the banish manifestation ability. It costs one of your spell casts, but you try to banish the thing. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Clear as mud.
There you go. Okay, so yes, you can unleash spell them. However, basically none of them can be set up that close to enemy units. So, like, they'll have their own thing that says they got to be set up some distance away. And because of that, then you won't be able to interact with their battle tactics, whether they're static or that. So, there it is. This is also the other big confusing part of the rules. Good stuff. Okay. All right. There you go. Hopefully I answered. And manifestations cost no points. That is correct, Willard. It is just a thing you choose. It's just a thing you choose. We'll talk about army construction here in a little while. All right, let's get on to some core changes. Now we get into the small stuff. Those are the big ones, the big stuff that's going to confuse people. Now this is just like, hey, lock this in your memory bank. These are the notes. These are the little things that might trip you up. Okay? We got there, folks. We did it. We got through the tough part. Those are the confusing things. Those two things. Okay? Hopefully that gives everybody a little guide. Less
Faction
confusing.
Train is also kind of confusing, but definitely not as confusing as manifestations.
Right. Faction Train is kind of like a static manifestation. The difference is it's just like already exists from the beginning, so it's not as much of a problem. Also, it's really fun to kill other people's faction terrain, so like it's just fun to charge and kill it. So there you go. Okay, cool. Pile in. Here is a fun core change. You can't pile out of combat. Now I hear you. You're saying, Vince, that's not a change. You could never pile out of combat. Ahaha. Wrong. Incorrect. In 3.0, you could like let's say there's 2 units here and here. You charge here. You could pile this way and pull this unit out of combat, right? And to make it so they can't fight because they didn't charge and so they have no pile-in ability, right? Okay. No longer the case. Now, pile-in is a targeted ability. You have to pick somebody within 3 inches, and you pile in. And when they're the target of your pile-in, you cannot end farther away from the target than where you were when you started. And you must end the pile-in in combat with all units you were in combat with at the beginning of the pile-in. So if you're 2 units here, you're in combat with both of them, you can kind of go like this a little bit. You can kind of swing to one side or something, but you can't pile completely out.
Yep.
Right? Okay. All right.
You can pile in to tag a unit that you weren't in combat with before, but you can never leave the combat ranges of the units that you were in when you started that pile-in move.
That's right. So you can certainly still sweep more people into combat through your pile-in, and sometimes that may be still a good move. But yes, there's but for the most part, you're basically locked in. I got you for 3 minutes. Oh yeah. Okay. Next up. Each model has a control characteristic. The unit has a control score, which is the sum of the control characteristics of the models in the unit after any modifiers. So if every model has a control characteristic of 1, and there are 5 guys in the unit has a control score of 5. If something says that you add 3 to your control score on that same unit would become 8. Because it's the sum. Okay? Is it model by model that can't leave the unit? No, it's your unit can't pile out of combat. You can still move models around. Like it's pile-in is a unit-based thing. Okay. All right. The control score, control characteristic thing. I think, Brendan, there's not much more to say on that one. It's just like
no. Yeah, the only additional is you can never be reduced lower than 1. Your minimum. Your unit's minimum control score is 1.
That's right. You always have a minimum control score of 1. Yes, you exist. You always at least exist. That's right. Okay.
It'll be sad to see 40 zombies count as 1 model, but it's what it is.
One question that I've seen, and this is something Halo talked about. He was wondering about how the plus control score, minus control score stuff is that important? Yes.
Hugely.
Yes. Hugely. Massively. Those abilities are so strong. So having a thing like he was kind of sus on the Ogre Gluttons that got spoiled, where they actually increase their control characteristic by 1 like every glutton. So the unit goes from counting as 12 to counting as 18, because it really does modify the control characteristic of each guy in the unit. Holy crap, that's good. That ability is so wild. That is a massive, 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 massive buff. Yeah. Yeah. Real big.
Yeah, and the other thing that's important with that is the sequence of application of abilities. It's active players application first, and then inactive players next. So there is a potential sequencing where you can bring yourself up to, you're valued at 1 for whatever reason. You can bring yourself up to +3, bring yourself up to 4, then your opponent brings you down, another -3 back to 1. Where in the opposite turn, your opponent brings you from 1 down to 1, and then you apply yours as the inactive player up to 4. The order of operations matters.
Yeah. Dadbod, what do you think is getting FAQ'd? The infinite model is not his range. No, that's not what I'm saying. No, control, that's absolutely not. You're still only counting your control. It's the sum of, I'm assuming all the models are on the objective when you're counting it, right? Like, I'm saying this amorphously. You still have to be like in the range of the objective to count for your score to count toward contesting, right? So, okay. What are you saying should get FAQ, Dadbot? Because like the ogre thing is absolutely intentional. That's not an accident. That's how it's meant to work. Okay. Combat range is 3 inches. Makes combat a lot easier. I don't know. That's it. That was spoiled a long time ago, but like, it's good. It's nice. It's a huge change.
Easy. Yeah.
Like, if your unit is more or less just free piled in, it's not a rumor, Dadbot. They shared the glutton scroll in the ogre faction preview. It's just what it is. It's just the ability. Okay. Like, let's say your unit can just free pile in. Like, there's nothing else there, right? So there's nobody that's tripping you up or something. It's just easy to grab a 6-inch stick and go, okay, these guys are all going to get in. Right?
Yep.
Okay. When using abilities, we've talked about this a couple times, but it is worth mentioning here again. When using abilities, the active player uses all of their abilities. The inactive player may use reactions. And then it passes to the inactive player to use all of their abilities. Effectively, and you mentioned this earlier, Brendan, it gives the inactive player perfect knowledge when they're doing those things. Now, most of the time they're doing those things at a cost, whereas the other person isn't. Like, I can move for free when I'm the active player; it's my turn, right? Whereas for you to move and redeploy, it costs something, but you still have perfect knowledge to make that move. So, cool.
Yep. It is useful.
It is useful. Yes, it is. It is just like, again, what I would really encourage everyone to do is to get in the habit of the following sentence. Internalize this sentence. Listen, everyone, very closely. Okay. I have completed all of my insert phase name here abilities. Do you have any abilities you would like to use? I have completed all of my shooting abilities. Do you have any shooting abilities you want to use? Okay, we will proceed to charge phase. I will use my charge abilities. I've completed all of my charge abilities. Do you have any charge abilities you'd like to use? Okay. And just get in that habit. Internalize it. It's nice, it's kind, and it's how the game works. And it will make the game much smoother. Okay. All right. Is redeploy still a D6? Yes. Okay. Coherency changed to a 1/2 inch. 1 model, if 2 through 6 models, you have to be within a 1/2 inch of. 2 models, you have to be within a 1/2 inch of, if 7+ models. That's a big change. That's a big change. Brendan, you are the single biggest known abuser of coherency in the history of Age of Sigmar. What do you think of this new coherency here?
As you said, Vince, in first edition, I was credited as being one of the reasons that the coherency changed to what it was in second edition. I saw what happened in second edition, and I said, okay, that's fine. I can still break that. And they made the change in the third, and I said, okay, I can still abuse that. I have struggled to find a way to abuse this in a way to make life difficult for my opponent. I haven't completely given up on that, but boy, they've made it real tough. My first pass reading was maybe considerations on actively trying to manipulate myself to be out of coherency and take the removals at the end, but I don't know, it's pretty clean.
They've locked you in.
I'll really miss what I did to you at NashCon as I resurrected one model at a time, 1 inch away, and walked my unit across the board, one skeleton at a time.
The first game Brendan and I ever played, it was back in, what was that? Was that 1.0 still?
I think it was 1.0, yeah.
Yeah. It was my Iron Jaws against your Nagash and Skeleton Horde, with guest starring Archon, I think, at the time. And
No, I never took them both together.
Okay.
It was Arcan it would have been my Necromancer on foot, and
There
that's
you
an
go.
Arcan model that I broke the legs on.
There you go. And yes, I went into you super hard, killed one of your units of skeletons out, killed the other one down to one skeleton left. One. And then you went, no problem. And you rebuilt the unit all the way. He was on this side of the board. I had him in his deployment zone, basically. You had kind of backboarded against me, right? And not all the way, but like you were pretty far back. You weren't on the line or anything. You started here and went top, all the way down and took my objective in my home territory. And I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
It was a good game. Okay. Chris Carlson, can you target and attack units through other units? Yeah, sure, as long as they're in your combat range. Absolutely. Like, you could have a hero... In fact, you got to watch out for that. That's very much with that combat range of 3 inches. Let's talk about insights from these two things. Here's the first one. Your old screens aren't good enough anymore. Like, oftentimes you'd see people screen, like, they'd put their guys here, and then they'd have the other dude standing right behind them to screen them, like, maybe an inch off them or something like that. Not good enough. People will ram up, hit your screen, and that dude is still within 3 inches. They will just go over the top and kill the thing you didn't want him to kill. So your screens have to be, like, farther out. That's number one. You can definitely attack over the top, and will, very much so. And the other thing I'll say about coherency and the half-inch and the one model and stuff is that light cav reigns supreme as screens. Them nice, like, sort of 60 mil cav bases or 75 mil cav bases, just turning sideways, running down a half-inch apart, taking up so much space. You'll love to see it. Super stonks on their ability as chaff. If you've got, like, cheap light cav in your army, well done. Okay. Let's see. There was somebody said something here under. Okay. Soundless Fern. First of all, great name, Soundless Fern. Does it seem like units may be locked in combat more and not just insta-deleted when they are touched, so having a better control score is going to matter more? Yes, absolutely. The vast majority of damage is, like, off a cliff. You will get locked in longer combats much more often. However, your alpha synergized unit finding the thing that it wants to find and, like, being on the charge and getting its bonus or whatever, and hitting an exposed unit that they don't have their proper responses up on will absolutely delete that thing. So, like, it's more that just the reality is across all of the combats you're fighting, many of them will be unfavorable and will just go on a lot longer. Okay. Cool. All right. Core changes. All right, let's talk about some pictures here. Picture pages. The thing I wanted to talk about on this page was mostly the rules of one. We've already talked about using abilities before. They made this very clear in the articles that said, like, you declare the ability, the opponent gets to use reactions, and then you resolve the effect. So, very straightforward. Magic stack. I cast this thing. Any responses, resolve. Okay. Fine. But the rules of one is really important. A unit cannot use more than one core ability per phase. We'll look at all the abilities in a second. A unit cannot use the same ability more than once per phase unless specified otherwise. A unit cannot be affected by the same passive ability more than once at the same time. For example, if the unit was within range of 2 different terrain features that have the cover passive ability, the effect only applies to it once. But there are many passive abilities that are like this. Okay? So if you can't like have multiple 5-up words in an aura or anything like that. They become passive abilities. Hence why I called that out earlier on those persistent things become passive abilities. Pretty straightforward.
Yep.
Right on. Anything else you want to add here?
Nope. The concept of passive, make sure that you understand persisting, which is again covered in 28.1. That's going to dictate a lot of things for you for the rest of forever, or at least 4th edition.
Yep. Okay. A lot of abilities, Willard says, a lot of abilities have combat range too. Might make it hard to stay out of combat and stay safe. Yes, you are correct. Oftentimes you will want to have things kind of grouped up, but that means it's easy to pull all of them into combat. Yes, 100%. Okay. So, like for example, shoot has core, attack, and shoot. So it's a core ability. You cannot use more than one core ability per phase. Easy. All right. Let's talk about deployment. I had mentioned this earlier. Let's get into the nitty and the gritty of this bad boy right here. So, deployment phase. It's a phase. It happens.
Yes.
Here's how you deploy. You use deployment phase abilities. Easy enough. What are those abilities? Well, they're deploy unit to deploy faction terrain or deploy regiment. Okay. So, and it goes in 3 steps. You start by deploying your faction terrain. Okay, cool, fine. So whoever begins deployment must use deploy terrain abilities first, followed by their opponent. You both deploy your terrain. Cool. Then you go to deploy armies. Unless otherwise specified in the battle plan, the players alternate using deploy abilities to deploy their units, starting with the player who begins deployment. Once the player has no more deploy abilities to use, their opponent must continue to use deploy abilities until they also have no more to use. Okay. All right. Fine. Good enough. And then finally, step 3, use deployment phase abilities. Some things you'll have will be used in the deployment phase. So these are like tricks like move the unit, redeploy the unit, do this thing, give this buff, whatever, right? Run forward.
Pick an enemy to be your chosen quarry, all the
right.
all the start the pre-battle round start of game abilities.
Right. Exactly. Pick this thing, they're marked, do this thing, run forward, the whole like the like run forward thing that some units, have. All that kind of stuff is a deployment phase ability, right? Okay. All right. Now, because of the way the regiments deploy, it means that your as I said, your heroes will largely dictate your drops. And again, going back to the insights thing, the reality is the battle is going to be between 2 and 3 drops. You will have a lower number of heroes on average. And you're like every dumb utility hero you want to add that's just like maybe got some cool minor ability, unless they can, like fit in a regiment or something, you're going to have to think twice about whether or not they're worth a whole drop. Right? So, okay. All right. Anything else on deployment we want to say here?
Right. The thing to keep in mind is you have the choice with your regiment to drop them all individually or all together, but you can't do what you used to do with battle regiments or with regiments in 2nd edition, which is bring them out and then drop the rest of it. You're either all or nothing.
Right.
Those are your choices, and chances are your choices are going to be all, unless your opponent is going to outdrop you no matter what, in which case, do them one at a time.
Right. If you just know your host, it can be beneficial to just like slow play it out and just be like, okay, I'm a million drops or whatever. It's fine. I'm going to lose anyways. Losing by 1 and losing by 10 is irrelevantly different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you go from there. And then you get a lot more information about their deployment and your setups, which is potent. Okay. All right. These are just the rules, the core abilities. Normal move, run, retreat, shoot, charge, fight. Fine. Okay.
Yep.
Easy enough. They're all here. They've shared some of them. I just wanted to share this out with everybody. None of these are really shocking. You can't shoot if you used a run or retreat ability. You can't charge if you used a run or retreat ability, right? Retreat.
When you retreat, you take damage.
Yep, when you retreat, you take damage. Yep, it's fine. It's all what you think. You can't move into combat still, right? So, it's fine.
Except in all of the cases where you can do and make excuses for all of them and break the rules.
Yeah, sure. Except all the exception-based design. Yes, exactly. But in standard, this is how it's going to be. Stefan says, do you think armies are going to be bigger or smaller this edition? Hard to say. We'll have to see. Like when we get into the nitty and the gritty of the PDFs, we'll do some harder predictions on that. It's hard to say. I don't know that there's going to be a material difference either way. Okay. This is the attack sequence and the damage sequence. Now, why do I have the attack sequence and the damage sequence page in here? Because it ostensibly hasn't actually changed that much. The only big change really is the fact that you're using a damage pool now, and like wounds are never allocated to a specific model. They're damage points that are on the unit. So like you don't set your dice down and be like, oops, I accidentally wounded my standard bearer, now I have to pull the standard bearer. You know, it's just a unit. You pull a model, you have to stay in coherency, that kind of thing when you pull stuff. The reason that I separate this out and I wanted to have this on is because I thought it was actually very important to highlight for people the fact that there is an attack sequence that ends in the damage pool being created, and then there is a damage sequence that has to do with the ward rolls and whether or not those damage points are allocated. This will be very relevant in a moment. We're teasing something. Okay.
What? No. Yeah. Foreshadowing.
This is foreshadowing, yes. Okay. But effectively, it's the same thing. You rolled a hit, you rolled a wound, they save, right? And then, or there's mortal damage. That all creates a damage pool. Then they take any wards, and you either allocate that damage or you don't. Great. Simple. It's much like you would have played all the time. And like I said, the big exception is you're not allocating to an individual model, so you don't have to like, oh, oops, my champion died. You don't have to do that anymore. Okay. Oops, sorry. All right. Aha! The reveal! The prestige! Okay, so now I'm going to tell you why I just told you about the difference between attack sequence and damage sequence. And it has to do with the third thing that I think is going to trip people up and confuse them. And that is companions. Yes, exactly. This is a sneaky one. So these are the weapon abilities. These are the universal weapon abilities. This is all of them. They are all very simple. And they are all very explanatory of what they are, with one notable exception. And that is companion. Okay? So like anti-X +1 rend, easy. Like anti-charge, anti-hero, anti-infantry. Great, you get +1 rend against that thing. Charge +1 damage. Did you charge? You get +1 damage. Crit 2 hits, crit auto wound, crit mortal. Did you crit? Do that thing. Shoot in combat. You can shoot in combat. These are straightforward and easy. I do not expect any confusion. They do what they say on the tin. However...
Yes, I think there's two howevers in here.
Okay. Companion. This weapon is not affected by abilities used by a friendly unit that affect the attack's characteristic or the attack sequence. Okay. So you cannot affect the attack sequence of a companion, but you can affect the damage sequence of a companion. Let me give you an easy example. Let's go back here to this little flowchart, and I will give you an easy example. You use an ability on a unit that says they do +1 damage. Okay? Actually, let's make it even simpler than that. That says they get +1 to wound. There you go. We'll start with a nice, clean example. Does that affect the companion? No. Not unless it says otherwise, right? If the ability specifically says it affects companions, it does. But in the normal way, no, because the wound roll is part of the attack sequence. Okay. Now, what if it's +1 to damage? Nope. Can't do that. Damage and building the damage pool is part of the attack sequence. It's a characteristic that's part of this. Can't do that. But let's say you use an ability that says the attacks of this unit ignore ward saves. Right? Brendan, you're familiar with abilities like this from 3.0, right? Assumingly they're going to exist again in 4.0. Okay. Does the companion get to ignore ward rolls with its damage? Answer, yes. Because ward rolls are part of the damage sequence. And nothing in this says you can't affect the damage sequence. So you have to pay attention to where that is happening. Okay.
The second, however, that I think is going to be confusing here is the stacking of anti-blanks and +1 rend. So if you understand 28.1 really well, you can ignore me here. Anti-charge +1 rend and anti-hero +1 rend result in +2 rend. That's very clear. Those are two separate passive abilities that are being applied to the unit.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. If you receive an anti-charge +1 rend from your character, your profile, and for whatever reason another source gives you anti-charge +1 rend, you of course have a total of rend +1. Because you cannot be affected by the same passive ability twice.
Right.
That is going to be a point of contention. Now, if you were anti-charge +1 rend and you were affected by an ability that gave you anti-charge +2 rend, the thing that is most important is whatever was applied second.
Yes. Also, if you have two different abilities but that happen to both work together, as in their example here on the page, anti-charge +1 rend and anti-hero +1 rend, and then a hero charges you, right? Okay. In that case, you would get the 2 rend. So yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun. Okay.
So have fun with that, everybody.
Yes. You're not wrong. Okay. David Campbell, he said, why is this a thing? Why not just block all buffs unless specified? That's actually my take as well. I would have preferred that, although that does create a different, interesting challenge. David, let me throw an example back at you. Okay. Let's say your unit is affected by an ability that says every time this unit kills an enemy model, they get a schmoogie boogie point. Okay? That's their ability. And then, somewhere down the line, they can turn in schmoogie boogie points for something else. Okay? So they a hero throws a buff on them that says every time this unit kills a model, they get a schmoogie boogie point. Okay? All right, great. That's the ability. Now, but that just says nothing about companions, right? In that ability, because it's just an ability. The question would then become, well, if the companion attacks and kills a model, does it add to the schmoogie boogie points? It had nothing to do with the attack sequence, it had nothing to do with fighting, it's just a function of the unit, right? It fought and killed something. Shouldn't that still add? So anyways, it's there's confusion kind of on both ways, although in the end, I do agree with you. I would have rather it just been more clear and said, unless it specifies otherwise, it doesn't affect companion attacks in any way. So there you go. David, it does say buffs from units. I wouldn't read too much
friendly
into that.
Units.
Yes, from friendly units. I wouldn't read too much into that. Okay. All right. All right. So at any rate, there you go. That's a fun little thing. That's fun stuff. So yeah, good times. Okay. Our job is to try to expose these things. All right. Other simple, quick core changes. Set up new models when you return when you return models to a unit, they are set up one at a time in coherency. It's fine.
In coherency with models that were already in the unit.
Correct. Correct, with models that are already in the unit. So you can't just like build out the line that Brendan was talking about, right? Because it has to, like, if your bubble's here, you can like build around, right? Okay. Model setup cannot use move abilities in the same movement phase of the same turn, or in the movement phase of the same turn. So if you set something up, be it a manifestation or one of your units or anything, no move abilities. Models in reserve have to be deployed before the fourth turn universally. This is just a continuation, basically, of what was sort of happening beforehand. Okay. A unit can never be replaced more than once. Worth mentioning. Why is my focus off all of a sudden? Find me. There you go. It's bothering me, being slightly out of focus. See if that helps. Okay. And then finally, guarded hero. This is just worth pointing. I know this has been shared, but it is an important change. If this hero is within the combat range of a friendly unit that is not a hero, okay, subtract 1 from hit rolls for shooting attacks that target this hero. And if this hero is infantry, they cannot be picked as the target of shooting attacks made by units more than 12 inches from them. So, cool stuff. By the way, that only guarded hero only applies to heroes that are not monsters or war machines. That is who that applies to. So, there you go.
Woo. So easy.
Okay. Very good. Branu, I'm going to tell you the answer is no, but for reasons. Okay. So, at any rate, great. Cool. Let's keep going. Hey, that's it, folks. That's the core rules. Okay. Boom, boom. New timestamp. With the core rules done, that means it's time to talk advanced rules. All right. Okay. Cool. Are there any War Machine heroes? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. A lot. Okay. He said ominously. But I mean, you can easily think of one example from 3.0. There's a hero who drove around a steam tank, probably gonna end up being a War Machine hero, but stuff like that. Okay, cool. Commands. We got 2 pages of commands. We've already talked about Unleash Spell, also known as Magical Intervention. You still got Redeploy and At the Double. With At the Double, you still do it before you actually make the run roll. You have to decide first. Redeploy, remember. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say redeploy very importantly has the run keyword. That's very important.
Yep.
That's very easy to miss as well.
Why does that matter, Brendan? But I don't understand. If I redeploy, it's the enemy's turn. What does it matter if I use a run ability?
Well, certainly right now it means nothing, but on the next page of commands, it will probably mean something. Foreshadowing. I can do it too.
There you go. There you go. And the big change, of course, is to talk about to rally. Again, we saw this already. Rally has, you make these rolls, you can use it to heal. Heroes can rally, units can rally. It's quite a controlled process. Like, honestly, this fixed rally in a huge way. I find rally to be, like, fine now is really my answer. Like, it's cool. It's good. Sometimes it's worth a command point, sometimes it's not. Units getting +1 to their dice that they roll. So they roll 7 dice instead of 6. If they have a musician is cool. That's the standard musician bonus. Yeah. Like, it's cool. It's fine. And the important part is you make all the rally rolls, and nothing feels worse than when you roll and get 1 die. 1 rally point, you're like, yay. 1 4-up. But otherwise, that's what it does.
Womp, womp, womp.
Yep. And then on the next page, the reveal. Okay, Brendan, explain yourself. Why did it matter?
Right. So redeploy being a run means that the most common use of countercharge is going to be can use a charge ability as if it were your charge phase. So the most common thing that you're going to do is use the charge ability, like the ability that lets you charge. Um, it, however, does not preclude you from using countercharge and using an ability that is a charge phase ability that is not charge and doesn't have those same restrictions.
Exactly. So, importantly, countercharge is not its own ability. It just lets you use a charge ability. Most commonly, like assuming nothing else in play, what you're going to use is charge, right? This is your charge phase. You're going to charge. And charge says pick a friendly unit that's not in combat and has not used a run or retreat ability this turn. So the point being that if you used redeploy, which has the run keyword, you can't redeploy and then countercharge. Okay. Now, if your unit has something that says generically, oh, for example, I don't know, they can run and charge, or if they have a different charge based ability or whatever, right? As you said, like maybe they have a unique ability in the charge phase. They can do this thing instead of charge or whatever, right? They can still use those abilities. So, yeah. Okay. Cool. So covering fire is different. Somebody said, but this doesn't stop covering fire because you don't resolve the shoot ability that stops you running, but you resolve shooting attacks. Yes, that is correct. You're not using the shoot ability. You're just resolving shooting attacks. The trick is that with covering fire, they have to target the nearest visible enemy unit, and they have to subtract 1 from the hit rolls for those attacks. So it's -1 to hit, and your targets are very limited, right?
It's very counterintuitive and super weird, but yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then you've got reroll charge, standard. You've got which is sort of after you can reroll the charge roll. You've got all out attack and all out command. Or all out defense. Sorry, all command, all out defense. When you all out attack, importantly, this also affects weapons that have the companion weapon ability. Woohoo! Your horsies are just as inspired when someone yells at them to fight. So, very easily inspired horses in the world.
So something that's very important to notice about all-out attack is that it does not say that it impacts you for the remainder of the phase.
Right.
It is about that attack sequence. So if you have something that fights twice,
that's right.
The second time it would fight, as written here, that unit would not benefit from it the second time they go around, which is very different from one, how it was used, but also very different from all-out defense, because all-out defense specifies that it's for the remainder of that phase.
That's right. That's right. And that is a very important ability. So if you've got like Varangard in 3.0, right? They had like a fight and then they fight again once a game, right? Or whatever. So if you have a unit like that first time, they and their companions are getting +1 to hit, whereas the second time they fight, no bonus. Yeah. And yes, AOD is still the whole phase.
Yep.
And then finally, power through, which is very often going to be power the heck away from whatever you just fought, is also a move ability, but it happens at the end of the turn. You can pick a friendly unit that charged this turn to use this ability. You pick an enemy unit in combat with it to be the target. The target must have a lower health characteristic than a unit using this ability. You inflict D3 mortal damage on the target. Then the unit using this ability can move a distance up to its move characteristic. It can pass through and end that move within the combat ranges of enemy units that were in combat with it at the start of the move, but not those of other enemy units. So you can't bring a new unit into combat with this move, but it does not have to end the move in combat. So you can just walk away. Just walk away.
This is going to be one of the most forgotten and unused commands, typically because you're probably going to think the way that you thought for most of 3rd edition, where most of your points are going to be spent in all-out attack or all-out defense or reroll charges. And if you're saving that point, you were saving it for Battle Shock, but Battle Shock doesn't exist, so that point of trigger is lost in your mind, and you go, well, I got to spend them. I'm not going to have this opportunity. Well, if you meet these very specific criteria and you held that extra command point, it's a very powerful command, But you are going to forget about it a lot,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah. Agreed. And yes, you can't move over the enemy models unless you have fly. So like you're it's meant to just like run around the edge of them. But yeah. Okay. Southwest Fern says power back into range of my wildwoods. Yep. Dougie Fresh, are there generic monster rampages or is it only the War Scroll abilities? Okay, Dougie, I'm gonna answer your question more than you asked. There are no universal abilities. Full stop. That's it. I mean exactly what I just said. There are no universal spells, artifacts, heroic traits, monstrous abilities, heroic things, none of that. All that stuff's gone. There are no universal abilities, period. End. What you get is what you get in your thing. Okay? Like everybody was freaking out. This is my truly, I must admit, I must take this small moment of Schadenfreude. Okay? As I watched as the rules got leaked and like on one of these pages as an example spell, it gives the it shows Mystic Shield as like an example spell, and people were like, "Oh, Mystic Shield is so much different now," and I was like, "Yeah, you bet it is." Because there is no Mystic Shield, there is no Arcane Bolt, there is no universal abilities. Period. None. Zero. The opposite of the null set. The emptiness and the void. Okay? All right. Okay. Very good. Yes, Plastic Crack, that's right. You can pass through the combat range, but you can't pass through the enemy models. Yep, that's right. Yes, there is no resurrection. There is no Mystic Shield. These things aren't real. It's not like within the normal game. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Does fly work in all phases? I believe fly. I'll find the exact. Fly passive ability. As this unit moves, it ignores other models, terrain features, and the combat ranges of enemy units. It cannot end its move in combat unless specified by the ability that allowed it to move. Ignore any vertical distance move for this unit. Yes, it works in all phases. There you go. Okay. Cool. We'll keep going. Terrain. Hey, we've got terrain rules, Brendan. What do you think about that? Freaking
They're
crazy.
confusing when you hit the battlefield.
Yeah. They take some
Yeah.
adjustment. They take some adjustment. But talk to me about terrain. Obviously, we, cover, impassable, obscuring, place of power, and unstable. So what do you think of this? What do you think of this? What's on offer?
I mean, in general, it's fine. To quote Vince here, it's fine. I don't think it adds a ton terribly. I don't think it takes away too much. The places of power are useful and have good points of impact. If you can get them in the right place, get your hero near it. It's useful. You're gonna roll one periodically, and you're gonna be sad. But I'm torn because I really like when terrain is multi-dimensional and actually gets in the way, and this for the most part doesn't feel like it does that. I feel like a lot of it could be played on just cut out MDF and you say obscuring, and the effect is there, and that's about it, or impassable or unstable.
Yeah. Yeah, there's actually impassable plastic crack. It's there. Certain things certain things absolutely are impassable. They do have a fun. I'll show everybody a fun thing. They have this this fun thing at the back, right here. It's the Citadel terrain list. This is every piece of terrain they've ever created. Okay, on 2 pages.
A few pieces.
Yeah, so like Arcane Ruins, Awakened Wildwood, Azurite, Ruined Chapel, Chaos Dreadhold Crucible, Chaos Dreadhold Hellfort, the Chapel, the Domicile Shell, the Enduring Stormvault, the Eternity Stare. Just all of them, which is fun. And it lists like what type of terrain it is, how many pieces per terrain feature, what size it counts as, and stuff like that. So it does give you the rules if you want to use any of that classic stuff for what it can stand in for, which is fun. So that's cool. But, you know, what I'll say is cover is still kind of the most impactful, but shooting is generally already greatly weakened for most people, so it's not as relevant usually. Impassable isn't very common. Unstable is super common. And what unstable is there for is there to just stop wobbly model syndrome, right? Now it does matter. It will impact a game as to like how many people you can get in to a fight, because you can like move across unstable, but you can't stop on it if it's more than an inch tall. And so what that usually ends up meaning is you've got to like, you just can't be fighting on unstable terrain. So you're like, it will constrain you in some way, even though you can move over it. It will still end up constraining you in combat and your charges and stuff like that. Obscuring is kind of, again, like it's a shooting blocking attack. It's another thing that hits shooting. So it's fine. The activate place of power is a really, really powerful thing. Like if you can get your hero to stand next to that thing and at the start of the turn, get that bonus, getting +1 even off turn, because the start of any turn you can try to tap into the place of power. So being able to get +1 to cast, and then then when you use Unleash Spell, you no longer suffer the -1. Effectively, you've countered the penalty out. It's meaningful. It's super meaningful, right? So, but you still have to roll for it, and you can hurt yourself, obviously. Hey, what's up, Steve? Hope you're doing well. He was just doing a big long drive today, so hopefully he's either in the car or got to wherever he's going. All right. I mean, the train rules are good. They're fine. I think they're impactful, but they're not like the end all be all is my answer. To me, we finally have the scaffolding of the basic requirement for terrain. It's not exciting, it's not super impactful, but at least but it's there. We've got a skeleton that's reasonable, right? It's a foundation. Yeah. Okay. No, Brana, we haven't talked about that. We're going to talk about that right now. Good segue, Brana. Thank you. You can fight the trees. Yes, you can fight the trees. You can go lumberjack, baby. You can chop down them trees. Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about magic. Power level X, some number, is the number of spell, prayer, or banish abilities you can use in a phase. Notice what is not in that list is unbinding. Unbinding spells is separate and equal to the power level. So, in any given phase, if you're, let's say, Wizard 2, you can cast or banish up to 2 spells. That uses the same pool. And then you can unbind up to 2 spells. Okay? All right. Cool. Right on.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because that was not immediately clear to me at first either. No. I was under the original assumption of, you use your spells and your opponent counterspelled, and that's it. I don't have an unbind attempt at it because I spent them all because why?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. This is something that tripped me up for a while. And I literally had to go back and reread everything and carefully think about it and how it was all working together to realize they were 2 completely separate things. Yes. Okay. No more than 1 spell or prayer. I said this the wrong way in my text. I'm sorry, everybody. I typed that wrong. What I mean to say is no one... I'm going to retype it right here. No 1 spell or prayer can be used more than once per turn unless it's unlimited. That's what I was trying to say. Sorry, everybody. I apologize. Okay. So what that means is that if you attempt to cast, the Shmoogie Boogie spell, and it's not unlimited, and you fail, or it goes off, or whatever, it doesn't matter. Whatever the result is, that was your one shot at the Shmoogie Boogie spell, right? Unless Shmoogie Boogie has unlimited. Then, go nuts. Every wizard can try it once. You still can't have any one wizard try an unlimited spell more than once, but you can do it once per wizard. Same thing's true for prayers and priests. Okay? And then finally, wizards and priests know all items from their lore. So, like, you're going to have a lore, it's going to have 3 things in it, you know them. There you go.
Yeah, and all of them know all of their manifestations as well. That's right. That's certainly big too.
Yep. Are there parameters for unlimited spells? What do you mean, Pat? I'm not sure what you mean by are there parameters for unlimited spells. Can you give me some more information on that? Okay. Yes, Nagash obviously can break these rules, as we saw in his War Scroll. He is Nagash. He's got them books.
With the power of hindsight, what an insane War Scroll to just reveal first.
Right, I know, right? Like, how insane. How absolutely insane. Like, just here's no grounding. We're going to show you this thing. You will have no context for this. We didn't even know what, like, power level really meant when they showed that scroll. They showed that scroll before we really knew what that was. That's insane. Okay. Assistant Ref, does the distinction between invocations and endless spells still exist? Not in the way you mean. They all do the same thing. They all are interacted with the same. Yeah, they're all still manifestations. If you mean, is there a difference in, like, who can make them exist? Yes. Like, because some come out through prayers and some come out through spells. Right. So, like, the things themselves, no, they function in the same way and have the same rules. The spell or prayer that summons them, yes, still a spell or prayer as appropriate. Okay. Anything else we want to say on magic here? We covered the manifestation thing at the beginning of the show, so that was the real head scratcher there.
No, that's it. I mean, when we get into the next slide where we talk a little bit more, where it talks about prayers and building up that power, I think that's the next thing I want to talk about, where it really explains why priests are so much more powerful than wizards right now.
Yep. Let's talk about prayers. Priests is better. Hey, did you spend your lifetime studying old tomes, pondering orbs, learning the secrets of the universe, and tapping its very arcane mystical forces to draw and bind them to your will? You're dumb. You should have just went to a church. Get thyself to church, idiot. Because prayers rule. Okay, so how do prayers work? Well, you start by making a chanting roll. You pick a particular prayer, and you make that roll. And if you roll a 1, the prayer fails. Okay. But that's a 16% chance. Not too bad. If you roll a 2 or more, you either get a number of ritual points equal to the chanting roll, which you can accumulate over time, or you can add the priest's current ritual points to the chanting roll, which, by the way, could be 0, by the by. And then if your total equals or exceeds the prayer's chanting value, it's answered, you resolve the effect of the prayer, and then reset your ritual points to 0. Okay, so what this means is that you get to bank. You get to bank, okay?
Yep.
So, Unleash Prayer is like 10 times stronger than Unleash Spell. Because who cares, right? Like, you just at worst case probably get some points. That's it. Like, you just probably get some points, and then you have a shot at the big prayer on your turn. In armies that, like, really heavily, Brendan, I'm curious your take on this, but my feeling is armies that are really heavily focused on priests, like that have their priests, basically they should just count themselves often as having 3 command points, because one's almost consistently just going like your example earlier with the Fire Slayers, right? You got
Yeah.
3 CPs because one of them is Unleash Prayer every turn. Period.
Yeah, certainly for that, and then the prayers have kind of like a alternate chanting value. If it hits that increased value, you get this and this.
Right.
So to be saving those up for the bigger version, and it doesn't stack on a per prayer basis. You can try and cast something that has a lower chanting value, like a 4. You didn't hit the 4. You got, you roll a 3 instead. You keep your 3 points, and you go, that's fine. Now I've got 3, and in this next go around, I know that the big version of this other prayer triggers on an 8. I'll take my odds at the 5 up to go do that. Where as before, obviously you can't roll an 8 on a d6 unless
Right.
unless you're
I
cheating.
have checked the math a couple times. I hired a team of scientists. They went away, performed rigorous tests, and they came back with the affirmative. You cannot roll an 8 on a d6 without any modifiers.
That optionality is crazy. Like even if you hit the successful number, you can choose to just bank the points and go, all right, well, I got to 7. I really need that 8. Okay, well, next time you go around, all you need is a 2, because if you roll 1, you lose D3. You don't take any damage. You don't take any mortal wounds from this. Which, on first pass, I was like, oh, obviously I read this wrong. You lose the number of wounds equal to the ritual points. No. It's exceptional. Really looking forward to...
No painful miscast. The gods are much nicer when their priests fail. Yeah.
Yeah, really looking forward to seeing armies that have prayer lores, what that looks like and how that scales, because that can be a real differentiator in power between different armies.
Yep.
Especially if you've got a good unlimited prayer.
Absolutely, totally agreed. Branu said, "Are there any manifestations with crit mortal attacks?" Can't talk about that kind of stuff yet, Branu. But if I had to guess, I would guess probably. And then let's see. Dakota Phoenix. Do you think every faction that only has one priest or wizard, like FEC only has one priest, for example, will get a whole respective lore, or just have war scroll prayers or spells? Can't say yet. Well, don't worry. We will get deep into all the armies. I promise. Okay. And then Matthew says, prayers up for my Chaos War Shrine being playable again. Yeah, indeed. We can all hope. Okay, and then it just has Unbind on it here as well. I mean, Unbind is exactly what you think it is. 30 inch and blah, blah, blah. You Unbind. And it is separate, as we mentioned. Okay. All right. Army construction. Bum, bum, bum. Let's build them armies. How are we doing this? On paper. Just get out of here with that app. Okay, so if your army is 50 points or more lower than the cap, i.e. 1950 in a 2K game, you gain a bonus CP battle round 1. This is the weirdest rule that they just decided to shove in here.
I thought that this is if you are 50 points lower than your opponents. Did I just miss that?
It is not. It is 50. Right. I'll read you the exact text. If the points cost of your army is 50 or more points lower than the points limit of the battle, you gain 1 extra CP at the start of the first battle round.
Well.
Yes, indeed.
1.2.1, Vince. Outnumbered. Army composition. In many cases, the total points cost the units in your army will not add up to the exact points, but you may not have enough points left to add another unit.
Yep.
If the points cost of your army is 50 or more points than the points cost of your opponents, you are the underdog in the first battle round. So that is a way to get another command point and the rules early for underdog in the game.
Fun stuff.
So we were both right.
Hey, there you go. Yes, we got him. There you go. So yes, you were referencing. Where were you referencing? Sorry, I apologize.
That is rule 1.2.1 in the army composition section of the additional added on rules.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Yeah. So, fun stuff, right? And here's my answer. People have said like, "Oh, so you just build to 1950?" Nah. No. I don't think so.
Sometimes.
I mean, I think that like it's cool to have that extra CP to unleash prayer, but like I'm gonna build the army with the points cost that I need. Like it it does not make sense that you would like actually weaken your army. And this is it. So lists are all gonna be 1950 from now on. Are we playing 1950? No, because like if the army that actually works and synergizes and has the units you need is like 1970, that's what your army's going to be. You're not going to like dramatically kneecap your army to get 1 CP. It doesn't make sense. It's just not that good. If it was 1 CP every round or something, right? Maybe I would do that. But like just getting the 1 CP, no. It's not like if you can do it, if it's in the right construction, sure. Like if you can get there and it's the army you wanted to build, awesome. Go for it.
If you have a specific plan where you know that you need 5 CPs in that first turn, yes.
Right. Exactly. But yes, exactly what Bronner just said. The first battle round is the round you are least likely to spend your maximum CP. Absolutely true. Like depending on what's going on, you may not actually be fighting too much in the first round. There's a lot less like throw your whole army across the table and alpha people. Just things aren't that fast. An important thing to note here, like I've watched a lot of Heywo talking about the speed of units, and a lot of in when he's reviewing all these things, he's thinking of them in terms of like 3.0 speed. It's important to note that like the speed of most units, fast units, fell by about 2 inches. Doesn't sound huge, but it's a big deal. Like lots of 12-inch cav went to 10, lots of 10 went to 8. Lots of 8 went to 6. Lots of 14 went to 12. It's not universally across the board, but it's a lot. And so because of that, like it just matters a lot for like actually getting across the DMZ. And you just don't tend to like alpha. The battle tactics don't encourage it. The nature of the thing just means you're probably not going to do it. So are you going to like willingly nerf your army for an extra CP in a round you weren't likely to use all 5 anyways? Probably not. If you had the ability, if you built your army and it's like 1950 and you're like, this is the army I wanted, thumbs up. It's a great day for you. But that's
pretty good.
Yeah. Each hero you pick mostly is a new regiment. You can then fill that with 3 additional units, 4 if it's the general's unit, and that becomes a drop for in simplest purposes. I am simplifying, but that's what these they have a little fun. This is actually a nice page. They have little picture pages in here. There you go. I think they shared this on the website as well at one point. But it's little picture pages that show you kind of visually how to do the thing. It's actually a really good reference. Okay. So that's cool. Auxiliary units do not exist. Forget that word. Okay? You do not take auxiliaries. It just doesn't happen. Unless you're building a goofball meme list. Like, fine. If you're building a goofball meme list, go nuts. Like, it's nice. I'm glad they put it in the game. Okay? Because there are people who take great joy in, like, just running, like, 12 Doom Wheels or whatever. Okay? And you know what? I'm glad that the rules allow for that person to create that army. I'm glad. Like, I really am. It's good that they put that in there. For any kind of even semi-competitive list, your normal match play game, not a joke list, right? You're just not gonna ever have auxiliary units. You just won't. Period. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, cool. Willard, why does Vince continue to gaslight us about auxiliary units? Obviously, I'm trying to keep them all for myself. Okay. You can only reinforce a unit one time. We all know this. This was shared a long time ago. But, like, it is meaningful. It's meaningful that your unit of 10 can never be more than 20. Like, that 30-man units don't exist. Like, you will feel that difference. It's there. It's material. Yeah, but it's worth noting. War Master means you are automatically the general. If you have multiple War Masters, one of them must be the general. And expect lots of people who you would think would be War Masters to be War Masters, is what I'll say. And then finally, you get 1 spell lore, 1 prayer lore, and 1 manifestation lore, all if appropriate, like if you have a priest or a wizard or so on and so forth. Okay. Cool. All right. Brendan, what did I miss here on army construction? Anything else?
Not something that you missed, but is going to be the thing that I think most people are interested in is how restrictive or how permissive each hero is in respects to what units can go with them.
Yep.
I think we're really looking forward to what that looks like. I think a lean too far in either direction in any individual army is going to create some issues. If you have armies where every hero can take everything, well then kind of what's the point? Unless there's a real reason to. But if everybody is segmented so tightly that only Foot Ironjawz heroes can include Foot Ironjawz units, and only Cav Ironjawz units can include Cav Ironjawz units, then you're going to be in a place where auxiliaries would make sense then, potentially. Because are you going to take a 150-point character, just to add another, 4 drops to your army, right, where, sometimes I don't think that's going to make sense, but that's only going to be in a universe where we're too restrictive. I hope when we get there, it's going to make sense, it's going to be balanced, and that there is going to be meaningful choice. That's the thing I know I'm looking towards, and I think a lot of folks that I'm in groups with, I think that's going to be interesting for them as well, and that's going to make a lot of material decisions for what tournament lists ends up looking like.
Yep, agreed. And this is certainly, prepare thyselves now. This will very likely be a situation of sort of haves and have-nots, where some people are just wide open, and some are more restrictive and stuff like that. And we will see the difference. So that will be interesting to when we get into that crunchy detail, because I agree with you. It's going to be a big deal. All right. Ba-bop. Pop. All right. I know we got Brendan up late here. He's an early sleeper. Okay. But we're on the last page, Brendan. We made it. We made it to the last page. Yeah. Battle tactics.
We're so close.
Yes. Battle tactics. Picking your battle tactics is an ability. You do it at the start of your turn. It's called Tactical Gambit. You pick one battle tactic you haven't already attempted. Here are the base 6. And these are our base 6 that we're going to use. And yeah, here they are. Okay. I just want to go through these very quickly. Do not waver. You complete this battle tactic at the end of your turn if 2 or more friendly units fought this turn and no friendly units were destroyed this turn. Okay? If you're forced to take the top of 1, this is probably impossible. Very good. Slay the Entourage. Pick a unit in the enemy general's regiment. You complete this battle tactic if that unit is destroyed this turn. Again, if you are forced to be given the top of 1, probably impossible, depending on your army construction. Vast majority of armies, this will be impossible. Attack on 2 fronts. You complete this battle tactic at the end of your turn if you control 2 or more objectives that you did not control at the start of your turn, and at least one of those objectives was controlled by your opponent at the start of your turn. If you're forced to go at the top of 1, probably impossible. In fact, based on the individual scenario, maybe just completely impossible based on where those objectives are vis-a-vis their army, or if they even exist yet or something. Okay, take their land. Pick a terrain feature, wholly or partially within enemy territory and wholly outside friendly territory. You complete this battle tactic if you control that terrain feature at the end of your turn. Maybe, sometimes, depending on the nature of where the friendly and enemy terrain lines are, possible turn 1, but still highly unlikely and very easily counterable by your enemy as they redeploy the living heck out of their force and countercharge with somebody else and just like shove everybody onto that terrain that they can. As you
That's a
go
very
over,
specific example you gave there, Vince.
I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about, Brendan. That is a complete imaginary. That's completely imaginary. I can't think of anything that would be like that. Okay. Let's see. Next, seize the center. You complete this battle tactic at the end of your turn if 2 or more friendly units are within 3 inches of the center of the battlefield and are not in combat. Okay, so possible if you're given the top of 1, right? But suicidal because you had to just march potentially 2 of your units or more, depending on how you wanted to move. You have to do the thing that we make fun of new Warhammer players for doing, new AOS players, where they get the top of 1 and they just like go, okay, and they move their whole army forward, their full move, and then go, okay, your turn, and then they get charged and they're like, this game's stupid, I don't understand why I lose. Okay, so yeah, this is literally a battle tactic telling you play the bad way. Great. Yes, you still declare this, Willard. Yes, this is a publicly declared piece of information. All ability usage is public information, unless otherwise stated.
Yeah, battle tactics are actually an ability once per battle round, start of your turn, and the effect is pick 1 battle tactic that you have not yet attempted. You can attempt to complete the battle tactic this turn.
Yep. So that's just committing suicide, unless you have some very, very sneaky plan, but it's usually just suicide. Or at the very minimum, it's just sacrificing 2 units that are going to get insta-gibbed. Unless you have like some very, very, very brilliant countercharge plan. But then you're banking on them not taking the double 1 into 2, and so yada, 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 risk all the things we talked about earlier. They move forward, they wipe your 2 units off the board, put themselves in a position for the perfect charges, roll, take 2, smash into you, break your back, and then go underdog and win. Great. Awesome. Wonderful.
Perfect turn. No
Perfect
notes.
turn. Yeah, exactly. And then finally, take the flanks. You complete this battle tactic at the end of your turn if you have at least 1 friendly unit within 6 inches of each short battlefield edge. None of these units are wholly within friendly territory. Okay. And none of those units were set up this turn. So they can't be set up. They can't be within friendly territory. They have to at least be partially in enemy territory. Okay. And they do have to be within 6 inches of each short battlefield edge. Sometimes possible on turn 1, depends again largely on your army construction. Do you have those kinds of like ultra fast units? Did you set up way out on the flanks? Oftentimes a lot of battle plans probably won't want you to do that. They'll be more center focused, just that's the nature of the thing. Do you have units that can clear your entire DMZ and actually get out of that space in time? And then by the by, none of these units the other trick here is that hope those units didn't get somehow countercharged because you had to put them way forward depending on what happened. So there you go. And yes, no, deep strikers can't complete this, James, because they can't have been set up that turn. Okay.
Yeah, that's a big one, right? Certainly something that I have abused quite a bit with Sylvaneth and your ability to move your tree revs around the board. If you're gonna do that, you gotta send them out a turn before, or if you have a off-turn movement teleport, to use that ability in the off-turn to position yourself
right,
so that when it does come around to you, that you have a chance at knocking that out.
Right, like you counter prey a translocation or something like that. Or
Yeah. Or like the Dreadblade Harrow preview from Night Haunts.
Yeah.
I believe that said any movement phase.
Right.
Gross.
Absolutely gross, yes. Soundless Fern, do teleports count as setting up the unit? Yes, absolutely they do. Yep. So what I'm saying here is that not deciding who goes first and then being given the top of 1 is limiting on your choices. So that's rough. Like these battle tactics are not top of 1 battle tactics. So there you go. And frankly, most of the army specific ones, especially as we've seen, don't really add to this much. Okay. Your army was not set up, Gabriel, in the first turn. You were set up during the deployment phase. Then you entered the start of the battle round. Those are two separate things. The deployment is different. Okay. So, yeah, that's it. That's the
edition.
Yeah. That's 4th edition. There you go. You all now have the core rules. Brendan, closing thoughts. Any closing thoughts?
Just like off the top, and I think some of you that came along with the full journey with us probably understood now my initial statements of it's going to feel familiar, but there are parts of this that are going to absolutely be moments of hesitation and tripping you up. And this is just the core rules, right? There's another 1,000 war scrolls that we haven't looked at, that we haven't seen, that are going to have exclusion statements to everything that we've read, that are going to have in addition to, or accept, or ignore, that are going to complicate this to an additional level. And if the base, if you don't have a firm understanding of the base, it is even easier to get stuck in the mire and a trap of how does this actually work. So take your time now before those war scrolls come out to really understand these core rules. This is a great time to send in your feedback to Games Workshop on frequently asked questions, because there is nothing more helpful than a day one FAQ, because chances are if you don't understand it, there's probably a few other people that don't either. And I can't necessarily speak to the process of how they decide what they're going to answer, but if you get enough feedback in a certain category, it becomes clear that, oh, this is not obvious, and this does need direction, or we do need to change this. Certainly professionally, it's something that I, have to make sure is in place. A lot of processes that don't make sense, making sure that work instructions are clear. And because it was clear to me doesn't always mean that it's clear to the person who actually has to use it. Really take the time to proceduralize it. Something that I did on the first pass through was take a lot of notes, and make sure that as I was referencing things back that, yeah, it did make sense. This, again, is really procedurally written, and for some folks, this is going to be really unusual. And that's okay. If it doesn't make sense at first, that's totally fine. It is written in a way that you just are not familiar with from a Games Workshop perspective. That is not your fault. Just take your time with it.
Completely agreed. Answering a couple final questions here. First of all, thank you, Plastic Crack. Thank you, everybody who watched. If you haven't hit like yet, hit that button. Share this out. We wanted this to be a good reference. That's why I started to do with the insights and focusing on the things that I thought would really trip people up. We really tried to get into the nitty and the gritty and say, not only this is the rule, but this is the second and third order consequences of those rules. So I hope that was helpful to everybody in game stuff to think about. I really do think that these rules are good and solid. There are those 3 areas we mentioned, which is basically the who's using the ability, the manifestations, and the companion stuff. That's the trip points. Those are the proud nails in my mind right now. But for the most part, everything else is really clean and straightforward. Priests are still good as always. Look, started in 2nd edition D&D, and it's been true ever since. Priest rule, okay? And then Rule of Cool Wargaming said, so Vince, do you think this can be a new player-friendly edition at launch? Do you think the module rules will help? 100% I do, and that's because of Spearhead. I think if you've got a new player, you go to Spearhead right away. Spearhead's going to teach them all this core stuff, doesn't stack any of this extra crap on top. It's very simple to understand and play. I think you could explain Spearhead to people in about 10 minutes and get them playing, and they would understand what's going on. Everything is very self-evident. And I think Spearhead is a great on-road. Or on-ramp, or whatever. It's good. That's the point. So there you go. Very excited about the edition. I think the core rules are in a good place. I'm sure we'll see some day one FAQs that clean up some of this stuff. But for all of you out there who watched, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Brendan, thank you for staying up late. I know this is very late for you. I appreciate you sticking it out.
Not a problem.
For everybody else, thank you so much. Hit like, hit subscribe. If you want to support the show, lots of ways you can do so. Down in the links below, there are affiliate links. You can hit those up for your hobby supplies as you're getting your army ready for 4th. Doesn't cost you anything extra, often saves you money and gives a kickback to the channel. You can pick up Uncle Adam and I's newest games. Don't forget, Death Wizards, available now, our newest game, down there in the description, as well as all of our past games. You can, of course, hit up our Patreon. That's focused on hobby and review and feedback. There's our merch store down there. All that stuff. We really appreciate it. Hey, as always, thank you so much for watching. And guess what? We'll see you next Wednesday.